Chapter 77. Su Bai was quickly dragged away. Even though his father, the Duke of Su, wielded immense authority, it would still take some time for him to settle the matter. This period of time was sufficient for Su Bai to stay in the prison for a period of time and remember this lesson for the rest of his life. Let's go. We'll talk in the residence. After leaving the matters outside to Meng Long and Shen Hai to handle, Wang Chong beckoned the Imperial Army commanders to head into the residence. Wang Gongzi is truly capable. The group of Imperial Army generals saw it clearly and raised their thumbs up in praise. In the eyes of the Imperial Army commanders, not only did Wang Chong's actions mean nothing, they even approved of it. Chuckling, Wang Chong led them into the lounge without a word. After a brief conversation, even though the king wasn't sure of the exact details, he was certain that the reason why so many Imperial Army commanders were gathered at the entrance was related to Zhao Fengchen. Their intentions were simple as well. They were here to buy swords. Some of them even brought a carriage full of gold over. As for the others, they felt that the agates, pearls, and gems that Wang Chong had embedded on the Wuzi steel sword were too cheap. Thus, they personally brought a huge box of top-notch agates, pearls, and gems over for Wang Chong to choose from. In other words, as long as they could get their hands on a Wuzi steel sword, they were willing to pay any price. As Wang Chong listened to their words, he fell into deep thought. The Wuzi steel sword had already made a name for itself through the sale of the Blue Bottle Pavilion. Wei Hao's two swords had helped him sever the swords of all the prestigious clans, thus establishing his reputation as the #1 sword in the world. And by selling the first Wuzi steel sword to Zhao Fengchen, he had successfully made a name for himself in the Imperial Army. In this unique group, Wang Chong could be said to have opened up a market for himself. However, the next matter would be even more important. Given that so many Imperial Army members were here to request for swords, it was impossible for Wang Chong to agree to all of them. Otherwise, if everyone in the Imperial Army were to have one, the price of the Wuzi steel would plummet. This was definitely not in line with Wang Chong's plan to strike it rich. However, with so many Imperial guards around, it was impossible for him to reject them. I'm sure you already know how sharp Wuzi steel is. Just as the Imperial Army members were discussing their requests, Wang Chong suddenly spoke up. The moment he opened his mouth, he immediately attracted everyone's attention. The more powerful the sword, the more time it takes. An ordinary iron sword might take half a day. But a top-notch one definitely wouldn't be as fast. Wang Chong said. That's right, that's right. Young master is right. I heard that those swordsmithing clans take more than a month to forge an ordinary sword. Since young master is forging the world's #1 sword, it's only natural that you'll have to spend more effort and time on it. If young master is worried about time, there's no rush, no rush. We can afford to wait, that the group of people chimed in one after another. This was not flattery, but sincere admiration. Although Wang Chong was only 15 years old, in the eyes of the crowd, his title as the world's #1 swordsmith was well-deserved. He had earned it with his own strength. Regardless of how old he was, such a figure would be recognized by everyone. More importantly, they had witnessed the prowess of the Wuzi steel sword with their own eyes, and it had left them deeply shocked. If not for that, they wouldn't have rushed to the Wang family residence. Since everyone understands, that's for the best. Wang Chong faintly smiled from his chair. He was not very old, but amongst this group of Imperial Army officers of extraordinary status, he naturally exuded a mature, magnanimous, and steady aura that did not seem to be at a disadvantage. I'm not opposed to everyone wanting to buy a sword. However, I have my own rules. At this point, Wang Chong paused. His voice was calm and confident, and it felt convincing. All of the Imperial Army commanders listened attentively to Wang Chong's words. Every swordsmith had their own unique habits and rules, and the crowd was no exception to Wang Chong's rules. Thus, they listened attentively. Firstly, the swords I forge are all top-notch. Thus, every single one of them takes a huge amount of time and effort. As such, I will need a month to forge them. No problem at all. The crowd nodded in agreement. The reason why they wanted to buy Wang Chang's swords was because of the uniqueness of his swords, which far surpassed the quality of other swords. Otherwise, there would be no need for them to go through so much trouble with the many sword shops and smiths in the capital. Everyone was impressed by Wang Chang's seriousness and focus. Secondly, I only know how to forge every single sword. Thus, every single sword will be unique in terms of design, and style. Furthermore, there won't be a second one. Wang Chong raised a finger and said. These thoughts had just formed in Wang Chang's mind. The rarer something was, the greater its value. These imperial army commanders were just the beginning. If everyone in the world were to view him as the #1 swordsmith in the world, he would never forge the same weapon. Only then would he be able to establish his image and maximize his profits. To forge a single weapon every month, and every single weapon would have a different design, and style. Such a requirement would definitely place a huge pressure on other swordsmiths. However, to Wang Chong, who had accumulated a huge amount of knowledge, this wasn't a problem at all. Don't. Can you forge 2, 3, or 4 swords every month? Initially, the crowd nodded in agreement. However, when they heard that Wang Chong was only forging a single sword every month, they couldn't help but wail. There are so many of us here, how can that be enough? There were at least 30 to 40 imperial army commanders here. If Wang Chong were to forge a single sword every month, how long would it take for him to gather enough swords? That's even simpler. Upon hearing those words, Wang Chong chuckled. I'll hold an auction every month, and every single sword will be of higher quality than the previous one. If anyone is interested, you can participate. Whoever offers the highest price will be able to buy it. However, I'll have to warn you first. The slots for the auction are limited, so not everyone can participate. Only those who have left a deposit for the sword will be allowed to participate in the auction. As for those who are here today, I can give you a discount. In the future, you'll be able to get a 10% discount when buying a sword. As for those who come later, the discount won't be the same. Boom. Initially, the crowd thought that Wang Chong was forging too few swords, so they wanted to argue with Wang Chong. However, when they heard that the slots for the auction were limited, they immediately charged forward. Wang Gongzi, no problem. I'm willing to pay as much as you want. Wang Gongzi, how much is the deposit? I'll bring it over right now. Wang Gongzi, you must sell it to me. I'm your loyal buyer. Wang Gongzi, reserve a spot for me. Everyone scrambled to be the first to rush over. They weren't the only commanders in the imperial army. They were the first batch to arrive. If they were any later, things wouldn't have turned out this way. In a while, when those people all arrived, it was unknown what would happen to them. As for the matter of only forging a single sword every month, that was nothing. Which of those famous swordsmiths wasn't the same? More importantly, Wang Chong had already said that every single sword was unique. Their design, style, and appearance would be different from one another. Furthermore, given the reputation of the #1 sword in the world, even if they didn't use it themselves, they could still sell it off in the future to earn a huge profit. Of course, the prerequisite was that they had witnessed the prowess of the weapon and were willing to sell it. As for the matter of only forging a single sword every month, wasn't it just a matter of money? As long as it could be solved with money, everything would be fine. Seeing a large group of people swarming over, Wang Chong was overjoyed. In the other world, selling swords for a deposit was a common method to sell real estate. Without doing anything, one could gather a huge sum of money. Wang Chong was applying what he had learned on the spot. At this moment, what Wang Chong needed the most was a huge sum of gold. If he were to give each of the imperial army commanders a set of gold each, it would be a huge sum. It didn't take long for him to cash in the promissory note at the front door. It was just a few gold taels for each of them. Wang Chong called Shanhai and Meng Long back and began writing the promissory note. The price of the Wuzi steel sword at the Blue Bottle Pavilion had already reached 40,000 gold taels. Thus, Wang Chong's entry fee for the auction was 20,000 gold taels. This wasn't a low price, but it wasn't too high either. It was a good way to determine those who were interested in buying the sword. As for the deposit, Wang Chong explained, every deposit would correspond to one entry fee for the auction. Those who held the entry fee issued by Wang Chong would have the right to bid for the sword. If one was unable to buy the sword, the deposit could be refunded. Of course, if one didn't wish to refund the deposit, the entry fee could be sold to others as well. Wang Chong acknowledged this as well. Furthermore, as the first batch of participants, regardless of who it was, they would be able to enjoy a 10% discount from Wang Chong. This way, the entry fee would become a hot commodity, and no one would be willing to refund their money. Wang Chong possessed the knowledge and memories of an entire world. In this aspect, there was no one in the world who could compare to him. With the help of Shanhai and Meng Long, all 30 Imperial Army commanders were able to write down a total of 30 notes. The deposit of 20,000 gold taels for each of them added up to more than 600,000 gold taels. This was a huge sum of money. Wang Chong's ability to earn money left Meng Long and Shanhai in awe. Not only the two of them, the guards, maids, servants, and nannies of the Wang clan who had rushed over upon hearing the news were also dumbfounded. Their young master was too inconceivable. To be able to earn more than 600,000 gold taels just by writing a few notes, how was this impressive? This was simply a heaven-defying skill. Compared to the young master, even the most formidable merchant in the capital, the one who knew how to make money, became insignificant, unworthy of a mention. Am I dreaming? Young master. Is this really the young master of our clan? Our Wang clan will become a wealthy clan in the future. The nannies, servants, maids, and guards who had served the Wang clan for decades widened their eyes in shock, and their bodies trembled in agitation. One of the old nannies was so excited that he suddenly fainted. My God! They had served the Wang clan for their entire lives, but they had never seen so much money before. The Wang clan had been thrifty their entire lives, and this time, they had finally struck it rich. In the blink of an eye, a few more nannies fainted from agitation. Even when they fainted, their faces were filled with excitement and bliss. Chapter 78. All of the commanders of the Imperial Army came in high spirits and left in high spirits. Even though they didn't manage to obtain Wang Chong's Wuzi steel sword, it was sufficient for them to obtain priority in the auction of the world's #1 swordsmith, not to mention a 10% discount. There were many commanders in the Imperial Army, and there were many who held higher positions than them. But before the small note in their hands, they had no choice but to back down. As for the 20,000 gold taels, it wasn't a problem at all. To be able to become a commander in the elite Imperial Army of the Tang dynasty, which of them didn't have a background? Even though 20,000 gold taels wasn't a small sum, it wasn't much to them. After sending off the Imperial Army commanders and making the necessary arrangements, Wang Chong stepped into his mother Zhao Shuhua's room. His mother had always been served by nannies and maids, but this time, other than Wang Chong and Madame Wang, there was no one else in the room. The 600,000 gold taels piled up like a small mountain, and it was a huge shock to Madame Wang. The Wang clan was a clan of ministers and generals, and Madame Wang was a knowledgeable person. Yet, Wang Chong was able to earn 600,000 gold taels in the blink of an eye. This was a huge shock to Zhao Shuhua and the Wang clan, who had always insisted on being honest. A gentleman loves money, but he acquires it in a proper way. If Wang Chong had colluded with some shady people to obtain the gold taels, Zhao Shuhua wouldn't have tolerated it. But in that moment, she witnessed all of the commanders of the Imperial Army happily sending gold and gems to the Wang clan. In fact, some of them even hated themselves for not sending enough. It was clear that Wang Chong's money had come from a legitimate source. Chong'er, what is going on? The room was silent. Madame Wang sat on the chair and looked at Wang Chong. She finally asked the question that had been bothering her in her heart. She still hadn't recovered from the shock of the 600,000 gold taels. There were simply too many things that Wang Chong was hiding from her. It's time for me to come clean. Wang Chong stood in front of his mother with his head lowered. A thought flashed through his mind. Although it wasn't the best time, it was better than not saying anything. This incident had taught Wang Chong a huge lesson. Sometimes, what you think is good doesn't necessarily mean it's good. After sorting out his thoughts, Wang Chong told him everything that had happened in Hyderabad. So, you borrowed money from the rich and powerful to raise the money to forge the sword? Madame Wang said. Wang Chong gave a nod of acknowledgement. Madame Wang stared at Wang Chong, sizing him up carefully. There was an indescribable feeling in her heart. For a moment, Zhao Shuhua had a strange feeling in her heart, but in the next moment, she felt gratified as a mother. Chong'er, you've truly grown up. Madame Wang stared at Wang Chong said. Which mother didn't wish for their son to succeed in life? The current Wang Chong had already achieved her expectations. Money had always been the weakness of the Wang clan. In the entire Wang clan, including Big Uncle Wang Zhen, Big Aunt Wang Ru Shuang, Little Uncle, and Wang Chong himself, there wasn't a single person who possessed talent in business. Wang Chong's big uncle Wang Zhen could be considered as someone who knew how to manage a business. Among the few clans, he was the one who had the best financial situation and managed to manage a few businesses. But that was all there was to it. Compared to those truly rich and powerful families, it was a world of difference. The Wang clan wasn't one who was skilled in business. Including Wang Chong's big brother and second brother, none of them possessed the ability to manage a business. But now, Zhao Shuhua saw an astonishing talent in her youngest son, one that far surpassed anyone else. More than 600,000 gold taels. This amount of wealth was enough for all the members of the Wang clan to spend for a few decades without doing anything. Mother, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have hidden this matter from you. Wang Chong lowered his head and apologized. Madame Wang shook her head. Child, through this matter, Mother can also feel that you have really become more mature in handling matters. In the future, there's no need for you to tell me about some matters. Just go ahead and do it. Mother believes in you. Mother, Wang Chong was moved. Looking at his mother, he was speechless. Leaving his mother's room, Wang Chong felt much more relaxed. Even though he was nearly made use of by Su by this time, it turned out to be a good thing. Through this matter, he had won his mother's trust and received her promise to go ahead and do it. After practicing his martial arts for a while in the courtyard, Wang Chong's big uncle Li Lin rushed into the Wang clan. Did those imperial army commanders come? Uncle Li Lin asked as soon as he entered. Wang Chong nodded his head. Ha, those fellows sure reacted quickly. No matter how hard I tried, I still couldn't catch up to them. Li Lin shook his head with a smile. Ever since he was promoted from his position as the Northern Gate Guard, Li Lin seemed to be in high spirits, and he was more talkative. Uncle, did something happen in the royal palace? Does it have something to do with Xiao Fengchen? Wang Chong asked. When Wang Chong tried to probe, the imperial army commanders were very secretive about it. They just didn't say what had happened. However, there were some things that couldn't be hidden from Wang Chong. That's right. Xiao Fengchen defeated Huang Xiaotian and was promoted to the imperial army commander. He's the only new commander in the past few years. Before Wang Chong, Li Lin didn't beat around the bush and revealed the truth. Commander Zhao's strength is around the same level as Huang Xiaotian's. In fact, Huang Xiaotian might even be slightly stronger. However, this time, he had the advantage of a weapon. Commander Zhao's sword not only broke Huang Xiaotian's famed palace treasured sword, Snow Drinker, but it also broke his tempered adamantine armor in one fell swoop and almost split his body apart. There were quite a few people watching the battle back then, and there was even an imperial army commander among them. Everyone was scared stiff by Commander Zhao's sword. Those fellows must have been by the side and slipped away soon. To think that they would come to your place. Huang Xiaotian and Zhao Fengqian's promotion was a huge matter in the imperial army. Not only did it involve the position of a commander, it also involved the internal strife within the imperial army. Wang Chong couldn't be clearer on this point. Even though Uncle Li Lin didn't go into detail, Wang Chong could sense that the battle must have been extremely dangerous. It's a good thing that Lord Zhao has been promoted to commander, Wang Chong said. Following which, he revealed the matter regarding the 600,000 gold taels. The relationship between Zhao Fengqian and Huang Xiaotian had changed because of him. In the future, many major events would change as well. Wang Chong was well aware that after being promoted to commander and receiving the resources of the palace, Zhao Fengqian's path of promotion would be even smoother, and he would probably reach the position of Grand Commander even faster. On the other hand, Uncle Li Lin had contributed greatly by presenting the sword to Zhao Fengqian. In the future, he would have a bright future in the imperial army. With this relationship, it would be much easier for Wang Chong to sell his sword in the imperial army in the future. Furthermore, Uncle Li Lin had always been the weakest link in the Wang clan. If he could follow Zhao Fengqian and rise through the ranks in the imperial army, the strength of the entire Wang clan would rise along with him. Today's matter won't be the first wave. Most likely, more people will come looking for us in the future. Thus, I would like to leave this matter to Uncle. With Lord Zhao's backing in the royal palace, it will be much easier for Uncle to deal with this matter, Wang Chong said. Wang Chong was prepared to let Uncle Li Lin handle all matters regarding the Wuzi steel sword in the imperial army, including the auction priority, as well as the auction. This wasn't just a matter of convenience or his identity as an imperial army member. Rather, through this matter, Uncle Li Lin's standing in the imperial army would be raised significantly. When most of the imperial army commanders, and even the Grand Marshal would need Uncle Li Lin's help, his standing in the imperial army could be imagined. His future path of promotion would probably be much faster than his uncle had imagined. Furthermore, with the protection of Zhao Fengqian and the Zhao clan, no one would dare to cause trouble for him. What was even more incredible was that the commanders of the imperial army who wanted the Wuzi steel sword came from all factions. This would, in turn, boost the standing of Uncle Li Lin and Zhao Fengqian in the imperial army, making it much easier for them to get promoted in the future. That is, if these people still wanted to buy the Wuzi steel sword in the future. All in all, only in the hands of Uncle Li Lin would the Wuzi steel sword be able to bring out the greatest effect. Don't worry, I know what to do. Right, your aunt asked you when you are free. If you are free, you should visit Uncle's residence and chat with your cousin so that you can offer him some pointers. That fellow is arrogant, but he's too arrogant. Your aunt and I hope that you can teach him a lesson on our behalf, Li Lin said. Wang Chong smiled. His aunt and uncle had a son, Wang Liang. Even though uncle's surname was Li, he followed big aunt's surname. In the prestigious clans, it was common for one's maternal clan to be powerful and one's paternal side to be weak. His aunt and uncle had high hopes for cousin Wang Liang, but it was a pity that cousin seemed to be getting further and further away from their expectations. Alright, I'll go when I'm free, Wang Chong said. It would be grandfather's birthday soon, and according to the rules, cousin would have to attend as well. It would be the same if they met again. As for now, with more than 600,000 gold taels, there were many things that Wang Chong could do. He could truly display his prowess. After sending uncle off, without any hesitation, Wang Chong brought Shanhai, Meng Long, and a chest of gold to the white agate jewelry shop. There, he found the two Sindhi monks, Ablanadin and Arloja. Masters, I have brought the money for the 300 June of Hyderabad ores. Wang Chong pointed and gestured. Pang! Shanhai and Meng Long carried a chest and placed it heavily before Ablanadin and Arloja. There's 80,000 gold taels in here. Take it. Wang Chong confidently said, his voice resonating. Even with Ablanadin and Arloja's composure, their hearts couldn't help but tremble upon hearing Wang Chong's words. But amidst their shock, they were also doubtful. But Gongzi, didn't you give us more than 30,000 gold taels previously? Furthermore, didn't you exchange the rest for rations? Why are you giving us so much gold? This has already far exceeded 90,000 gold taels, 80,000 gold taels, along with the 30,000 gold taels that Wang Chong had given them previously, amounted to more than 110,000 gold taels, far exceeding the agreed upon amount. Chapter 79. Ha ha ha, I won't hide it from the two of you. Due to your Hyderabad ores, I have earned quite a sum of money this time. Thus, I made a sudden decision to raise the value of our transaction from 300 gold taels per June to 400 gold taels per June. Wang Chong chuckled. Ah! The two were astonished. I know that Sinlu is in urgent need of this money, so feel free to take it. Take the extra money as my advance payment for the next batch. Of course, this is only the first batch. In the future, as we work together, this price can be raised further. Wang Chong said. Gongzi. The two were even more astonished. However, they were even more moved. Many people said that business was business, so other than business, there was no relationship between them, needless to say, friendship. Sinlu's situation was extremely dire, and no amount of money could save it. The two wanted to ask for help, but who would lend them money? Wang Chong had earned a sum of money, so there was no need for him to give them more money. This was no longer just a simple business deal. Young master, we will definitely engrave this kindness into our hearts. We thank you on behalf of Sinlu. Gongzi, don't worry, we will repay you generously in the future. Ablanadin and Arloja lowered their heads and said sincerely. Wang Chong smiled silently. Wang Chong wasn't a fool. Before the two of them said anything, he raised the value of the transaction from 300 gold taels per June to 400 gold taels, raising the price by a third. Wang Chong wasn't someone who had nowhere to spend his money, but someone who was thinking on a deeper level. After receiving the advance payment of more than 600 gold taels from the 30 Imperial Army commanders, the first thing Wang Chong thought of was how to maintain the supply of Hyderabad ores and obtain more ores. A single Wuzi steel sword wouldn't be of much use, and 300 Wuzi steel swords were limited as well. They could only be used in small-scale battles, and they couldn't be used strategically. In order to achieve the terrifying effect of influencing the outcome of a war, the Wuzi steel sword had to be equipped with an army group, at least tens of thousands of soldiers. Only then would it be able to display its invincible power on the battlefield. Only then could he help Wang Chong complete his unfinished wish and mission. Therefore, from the very beginning, Wang Chong's ambition was not limited to 300 June of Hyderabad ore, but the entire Hyderabad or mountain range. If possible, Wang Chong even wanted to buy the entire mine. And that 600,000 taels of gold had made Wang Chong's ambition somewhat feasible. Sindhu was a long distance away from the Central Plains, but it was much closer to the Abbasid Caliphate and Karak-Spazinu. This was a reality that Wang Chong had to consider when competing for the Hyderabad ore. The pavilion closest to the water enjoys the moonlight first. One was near while the other was far away. Considering from the perspective of Sindhu, it was impossible for them to prioritize the distant Central Plains over the nearby Abbasid Caliphate and Karak-Spazinu. If Wang Chong wanted to compete against the Abbasid Caliphate and Karak-Spazinu, he could only make an issue out of the price. Even though Ablanadin and Arloja didn't say it explicitly, Wang Chong could guess that 300 gold taels per June was Sindhu's base price. Otherwise, they wouldn't have said that they wouldn't accept a single gold tael less. The Abbasid Caliphate and Karak-Spazinu would surely offer the same price as well. One doesn't wake up early without benefits. If Sindhu could obtain more benefits from him, they would surely prioritize the faraway Central Plains over Karak-Spazinu and Abbasid Caliphate. At the same time, if Sindhu were to obtain more benefits from him, they would have higher expectations for the Abbasid Caliphate and Karak Spazinu. However, Abbasid Caliphate and Karak Spazinu would find it hard to accept such a drastic increase in the price. They would never do such a thing. Increasing the conflict between the two would only benefit him. This was Wang Chang's true ambition and scheme. A few tens of thousands of gold taels was a small matter. What was truly important was to obtain the largest supply of Hyderabad ores. Walking out of the white agate shop, Wang Chong couldn't help but burst into laughter. Then, he drove to the Ghost Tree district. Following Su Bai's arrest and imprisonment in the Court of Judicial Review, news of what had happened at the Wang family residence spread like wildfire to all of the nobles in the capital. What? Su Bai was arrested. The person who sold the swords at the Blue Bottle Pavilion is Wang Chong. When the news reached the Yao family residence, Yao Feng slammed his hand on the table with shock in his eyes. He had been waiting for news from Su Bai, but he didn't expect to receive such news instead. Yes, Gongzi. Upon receiving the news, Duke of Su had already left the court to save Su Gongzi. As for Wang Chang's side, we saw it with our own eyes. Many imperial army commanders brought carriages full of gold and jewels to the Wang family to seek an audience. Every single one of them proclaimed Wang Chong as the #1 swordsmith in the world. Kneeling on the floor, Gao Fei reported. When the incident happened, Gao Fei was among the crowd as well. However, he was extremely careful. Knowing that Wang Chong knew him, he had been acting cautiously so as to not attract the attention of Wang Chong. Su Bai was arrested, and Wang Chong was the #1 swordsmith in the Blue Bottle Pavilion. Even now, he was still shocked by the news and found it hard to believe. 40,000 taels for a sword, what kind of sword is worth so much? He's just a kid who's still wet behind the ears. How could he have such an ability? Yao Feng gritted his teeth. Not too long ago, Wang Chong was just a profligate scion in the capital, a target for him to exact vengeance on the Wang clan. In fact, Wang Chong was able to play him in the palms of his hands with just the lowly ma zhou. But in an instant, Wang Chong became the #1 swordsmith in the world. The reversal was too shocking, such that Yao Feng found it hard to believe and accept it. We don't know either. However, it's impossible for the imperial army to be mistaken. Furthermore, Su Gongzi asked them if they were mistaken. But in the end, he only received mockery from the imperial army. Kneeling on the floor, Gao Fei said. The shock brought about by Wang Chang's hidden identity wasn't limited to just the few people in the room. In fact, all of the profligate scions present had received a huge shock. When he arrived, a large number of scions had gathered in the Eight Gods Pavilion to discuss this matter. Through this matter, Wang Chang's standing among the scions had risen to a level that ordinary people couldn't reach. The Wang clan was a clan of generals and ministers, and it didn't pale in comparison to the Yao clan. The Yao clan's old master Yao had students all over the world, and the Wang clan's Duke Jiu also had students all over the continent. The Yao clan had King Qi as their backing, and the Wang clan had the King of Song as their backing. Just that, the Wang clan wasn't good at business, and this had always been their weakness. But if the Wang clan could make up for this weakness and become wealthy as well, then the Wang clan wouldn't pale in comparison to the Yao clan. Now, when people talked about Wang Chong in private, they would say that he wasn't inferior to Yao Feng at all, and that he was one of the most powerful scions in the capital. However, Gao Fei didn't dare to say all of this to Yao Feng. The room was silent. Yao Feng stood silently in the room, and his face was dark. I wasted so much of my time for a Su Bai. Looks like it's time to carry out that plan. Yao Feng's mind was in turmoil. You can leave now. Tell Duke of Su that I'll find a way to get my father's cooperation to save Su Bai. Yao Feng said. Thank you, Gongzi. Delighted, Gao Fei took his leave. Looking at Gao Fei's back, Yao Feng sneered coldly. Even though Gao Fei didn't say it explicitly, how could he not guess that Duke of Su had sent him here? Slandering an important official of the royal court, Wang Chong, you sure are ruthless. Yao Feng sneered. Wang Chong and Su Bai were 15 and 17 years old respectively, and they were both children. Normally, such a matter wouldn't reach the court of judicial review. However, Su Bai was useless, and Wang Chong managed to grab hold of his sore spot. Even though slandering an important official of the royal court wasn't enough to kill him, it was more than enough for him to suffer. Duke of Su might be influential, but he didn't have any connections in the Bureau of Punishments. Thus, he could only rely on the Yao clan for this matter. Leaving the room, Yao Feng headed into the inner residence. At the same time, a messenger pigeon flew out from his robes and flew out of the Yao clan's residence. The messenger pigeon soared into the sky and flew through the air toward a tavern in the east of the city. Shwa! Before the pigeon could descend, a peng sound could be heard as the window opened. A black shadow flashed and the pigeon was caught. Humph, it has finally begun, a cold voice drifted out from the room, and then there was no more sound. Even the pigeon seemed to have disappeared from the room. The moonlight shone on the ground, the walls, and the roof, forming a layer of white frost. Under the moonlight, a few masked figures dressed in black stood on a roof not too far away from the Wang family residence. These black-clothed men were tall, and each of them held a sharp saber in their hands. Their gazes were fixed on the Wang family residence. Do you all understand the mission this time? No matter what, we have to obtain the number 1 sword of the Central Plains. Also, we have to kill as few people as possible. The Wang family is a clan of generals and ministers in the Central Plains. If a large number of people were to die, the royal court would investigate the matter. This is extremely disadvantageous to us from the western regions. The leader of the masked men stood at the very front and said. Without needing anyone to expose him, he had already revealed his identity. In reality, their physique was different from that of the people of the Central Plains. Even if they were to hide under black clothes, it was useless. Yes, leader. The group lowered their heads and didn't say a single word. With a single look, it was clear that they had gone through strict training to obey orders. Very good. These are bewildering smoke. Bring 5 of them each. If you see anyone from the Wang clan, just throw them on the ground and they will faint soon. Remember, the Wang clan has many guards, and they are a clan of generals and ministers. There are often imperial army patrolling the area. Thus, our goal isn't to fight with them or kill everyone from the Wang clan. What we want is to swiftly obtain the sword and hand it over to the Lord. This is the prerequisite. Don't get caught up in the battle, understand? The leader of the black-clothed men said. Yes, leader. The group of black-clothed men replied. Good. Let's move. Chapter 80. Hua. In the room, Wang Chong spread out a 3 long xian paper and dipped it in ink. He began to consider the design of the second Wuzi steel sword for auction. The imperial army wasn't a fool. Those who could reach their current position were all capable individuals. Even though they were straightforward in giving away money, the more straightforward they were, the higher their expectations of the sword. Thus, the sword that Wang Chong forged had to be able to subdue them. It's fortunate that the swords and sabers in this world are rather simplistic. I still have many choices. Wang Chong thought. In this era, there were many sword merchants like the few swordsmithing clans. As they only focused on the sharpness of the swords and neglected the appearance of the swords, most of the swords and sabers were made in the same style. In comparison, Wang Chong could be said to be a grandmaster in this aspect. As the saying goes, even good wine fears the alley. Packaging wasn't just important for swords and sabers. A Tao Guan and a Celadon. Many people would definitely pay more attention to the Celadon. A sword that was more aesthetically pleasing to the eye would definitely be different from ordinary swords and sabers. I've already tried using a sword previously. Perhaps I should try using a saber for the second auction. Wang Chong quietly said to himself. Sabers and swords were always the two kings of all weapons. Even though there were more people who used swords than sabers in the Central Plains, the status of sabers wasn't low. This was because sabers were more difficult to wield. Unless one was a top-notch expert, it would be difficult for one to wield a saber well. And in the Imperial Army, Wang Chong knew of a few top-notch generals who wielded sabers. If Wang Chong wanted to establish his position as the #1 swordsmith in the world, he couldn't just forge swords. He had to establish a supreme position in the field of sabers as well. All of the generals in the Imperial Army were picky individuals. If he wanted to satisfy them, he couldn't just use an ordinary saber. Wang Chong's mind was in turmoil. Soon, he thought of something. In the future, other than the Wuzi steel sword, the other one was the Japanese saber. The Japanese katana originated from the Tang dynasty's Mo Dao, but it was easier to slash than the Mo Dao, and more effort was put into its shape. However, Japan did not exist in this world. Wang Chong did not plan to simply imitate the Japanese sword. Instead, he planned to use the Japanese sword as a foundation to design a new sword. Dipping the brush in ink, Wang Chong pondered for a moment before drawing on the xian paper. A moment later, a brand new sword that was different from any other sword in this world appeared on the paper. This sword had the same curvature as the Japanese saber, but it was more than twice as long, reaching more than 6 feet, almost 7 feet. The blade was long and narrow, and the sword was relatively narrow as well. Such a saber was completely unusable by ordinary people. It was basically the same as their height. But Wang Chong didn't care. This kind of 6 feet long sword was wide and thick, and weighed more than 60 kilograms. For ordinary people, it was impossible to use, but for martial artists with extraordinary strength, it was easy to hack and slash, and could precisely display the greatest lethality. Wang Chong was certain that such a saber would be a fatal attraction to those top-notch saber commanders in the Imperial Army. However, the materials required will increase significantly. I'll need at least 2 jun. Wang Chong thought. Wang Chong only spent a jun of ores to forge the Wuzi steel sword, but the forging of such a sword would require at least 2 jun. Even though the cost would increase, the price would also increase correspondingly. His profits would only be greater. Who? Just as he was contemplating, he suddenly heard a slight sound of wind. Hearing this, Wang Chong frowned and immediately stopped. Someone's here. Wang Chong's eyebrows twitched as he immediately realized what was going on. Even though he had lost all of his martial arts and had to start from scratch, he still had his foresight and experience. This was definitely the sound of clothes fluttering in the wind. Someone had snuck into the Wang family residence. If you think that you can enter and leave the Wang family residence as you please, you are gravely mistaken. Wang Chong sneered coldly. Regardless of whether it was the 600,000 gold taels or the Wuzi steel sword, they were more than enough to attract the covetous eyes of many. A man's wealth is his own ruin. If Wang Chong didn't even have this bit of wariness in his heart, he would have been a fool to be the Grand Marshal of the Central Plains in his previous life. Pooh! Blowing out the candle on the table, Wang Chong grabbed a Wuzi steel sword from the wall, pushed open the window, and sneaked out. Back then, at the Wei clan's smithy, Wang Chong forged a total of 4 swords. Only one of them was decorated with agate and gems, and the hilt and scabbard were gold-plated, making it look beautiful and elegant. As for the other swords, they weren't decorated. Furthermore, Wang Chong didn't intend to sell them either, so he kept them in the residence. The moonlight was like frost. Under the moonlight, one could clearly see black figures leaping from the roofs, the ground, and the walls, heading in the direction of the Wang clan storeroom. Very familiar. They must have scouted the place clearly during the day. Wang Chong thought. Every clan had their own storehouse to store gold, silver, and other important items. These people had sneaked into the Wang family residence, but their goal was clear. They had clearly scouted the area during the day and understood the layout and structure of the Wang family residence from the nearby highlands. The Wang family residence was silent. These black-clothed men seemed to have entered the Wang family residence without alarming any maids, guards, or nannies. Wang Chong stood in the darkness and quietly watched, inwardly sneering, but he said nothing. General clans had strict restrictions on the number of guards and private soldiers they kept, but it was more than enough to deal with these people. It's about time. Just as the black-clothed men were about to reach the entrance of the Wang family residence's storehouse, a thought flashed across Wang Chong's mind. Roar! Just as the black-clothed men were about to enter the Wang family residence's storehouse, a furious roar suddenly broke the silence. Like a clap of thunder, it reverberated throughout the entire Wang family residence. Who goes there? Along with the furious roar, the air trembled, and a black shockwave burst forth from the Wang family residence's storehouse. The black-clothed men paled in fright, and as though a broken kite, they were sent flying. Who dares to barge into Wang Gongzi's residence? With a furious roar like that of a lion, two thin but powerful figures rushed out of the Wang family residence, their sleeves fluttering in the wind. These words weren't spoken in the language of the Central Plains but in Sanskrit. It was a pity that no one could understand them. They're finally out. Seeing Ablonadin and Arloja charge out, Wang Chong finally smiled. This was what it meant to return a favor with a plum. The 80,000 gold taels from yesterday wasn't spent in vain. Wang Chong only told them that he hoped that the two of them would help protect the Wang family residence and prevent anyone from coveting the Hyderabad ore and the several 100,000 gold taels, and the two of them agreed without any hesitation. Wang Chong was currently a major customer of Sinnu. If someone wanted to steal the money he used to buy the Hyderabad ore, they would be in deep trouble. There was no need for Wang Chong to explain this matter to the two of them. Boom! From afar, Ablonadin and Arloja charged into the crowd of black-clothed men like two lions, sweeping through everything in their path. With just the two of them, they managed to block the attacks of more than 10 black-clothed men. The roiling black shockwaves sent the black-clothed men flying like paper, crashing into the walls and the ground. Come out! Enemy attack! At the same time, the voices of the two Sindhi monks alarmed the guards of the Wang family residence. From his mother's residence, the guest hall, the rooms where the maids, nannies, and servants lived, many guards of the Wang family residence charged out. Preparedness ensures success, and unpreparedness leads to failure. Since Wang Chong had expected that the 600,000 gold taels and the Hyderabad ore would attract the attention of others, how could he not make preparations beforehand? His mother's residence, the maid's residence. Wang Chong had arranged for guards to guard all the important places. If not for this, Wang Chong wouldn't have been so daring as to not warn them when they entered. Kill! A large group of Wang family residence guards charged out from the corridors and rooms. The swords in their hands gleamed coldly under the moonlight. In just a short moment, the two groups of guards clashed fiercely in the courtyard. The guards of the Wang family residence weren't many among the clans of ministers and generals. But compared to these black-clothed men, they had far more guards. The sound of metal clanging echoed endlessly, and in just a short moment, the entire courtyard of the Wang family residence was filled with cold gleams. Someone is heading straight for my residence. Suddenly, Wang Chong's ears twitched. He heard the sound of clothes fluttering in the wind. From the looks of it, it wasn't just the Wang family residence's storeroom. Even his own study was being searched. Xiao! Just when Wang Chong sensed that someone was approaching, there was a flash of cold light in the darkness. Several scimitars, gleaming with cold light, fiercely revolved in the air as they flew toward Wang Chong. Young master, be careful. Upon seeing this sight, Shanhai and Meng Long, who were guarding Wang Chong's study, panicked. Shouting, they dashed out from the darkness. Wang! The air trembled, and in the blink of an eye, Meng Long abruptly threw out his sword. Clang! The sword struck one of the scimitars in midair, but the other scimitars continued flying toward Wang Chong at lightning speed. This is bad. Seeing the machetes flying toward Wang Chong, and the sharp blades seemed as though they were about to slice Wang Chong's head into two, the faces of the duo paled and cold sweat trickled down their backs. Wang! Even though Wang Chong's cultivation wasn't high, his reaction wasn't slow. Just as the machetes were about to reach him, Wang Chong tilted his body backward and executed a simple, tortoise back, dodging the chain of attacks by a hair's breadth. His movements were calm and simple, and even the two Karak-Spazinu masked men were dumbfounded. Chapter 81. So. The scimitars spun rapidly in the air. After drawing a huge arc in the night, they flew into the hands of a few masked men in black. Only then did the masked men realize what was going on. Kill him. The few of them spoke in a language that Wang Chong couldn't understand. Wielding their machetes, they charged forward. Protect the young master. Shen Hai and Meng Long didn't hesitate. They immediately rushed over and stood beside Wang Chong to protect him. Meng Long. Catch! Wang Chong kicked Meng Long away and picked up the sword that had fallen to the ground. Meng Long caught the sword and started fighting with the masked men of Karak-Spazinu. The battle was extremely intense, but Wang Chong didn't participate in it. His strength wasn't sufficient, and he wasn't a match for these masked men. On top of that, Shen Hai and Meng Long were veterans who had retired from the military. Even though they had sustained some injuries in the previous battle, their experience and teamwork were still top-notch. Furthermore, more and more guards were gathering in the Wang family residence, and some of them were already rushing over. I didn't expect the saber of Karak-Spazinu to have such a function. Wang Chong glanced at the machetes in the hands of the masked men. These machetes were like boomerangs, able to be shot out from their palms and be used as hidden weapons. This was the first time Wang Chong had seen such a method of usage. It could be seen that there was a high requirement for such a method. Otherwise, if one couldn't kill the opponent, they would be killed by the boomerangs. This can be considered as a butterfly effect. Wang Chong thought. In his previous life, Wang Chong didn't have any dealings with the Hyderabad ores. This time, he was the one who bought the Hyderabad ores and forged the Wuzi steel sword, thus attracting the attention of these assassins. Meng Long, reef-gazing moon. Shen Hai, white ape gazing back. Wang Chong suddenly shouted. Out of the blue, Meng Long raised his sword and stabbed it diagonally into the chest of a masked man who had just leaped up. Shen Hai tilted his head to the side and dodged a machete that was flying towards him in a flash. Meng Long was still fine, but Shen Hai broke out in cold sweat. If not for Wang Chong's timely warning, he would have been struck in the neck by the machete. That lad is up, kill him. The eyes of the masked men turned cold. They immediately sensed Wang Chong's presence. If it weren't for his reminder, one of the two guards would have already died. Humph. Wang Chong sneered coldly. Even though he didn't understand the language, he was still able to understand it. However, upon seeing one of the masked men trying to shake off Shen Hai and Meng Long to deal with him, he knew what they were up to. Before they could do anything, Wang Chong suddenly attacked. So. Wielding the sword in his right hand, Wang Chong suddenly curled up together with his sword, and as though a bolt of lightning, he dashed in between Shen Hai and Meng Long. Young master, don't. Be careful. The faces of the duo paled in fright. Every single one of them was an Origin Energy Tier 8 expert, and they were skilled in assassinations. Furthermore, they were well coordinated, and none of them were a match for Wang Chong individually, needless to say, all of them working together. By doing so, Wang Chong was placing himself in grave danger. Lad, you're courting death. Between Shen Hai and Meng Long, a black-clothed masked man also noticed Wang Chong pouncing toward him. Sneering savagely, the scimitar in his hands glowed brilliantly as he slashed it toward Wang Chong with the speed of a thunderbolt. The might behind this slash was so great that even the air around it exploded, causing a huge gale to blow. Wang! Wang Chong thrust his right foot into the ground, moving from extreme movement to extreme stillness, dodging the saber in a flash. But in an instant, Wang Chong abruptly dashed forward, and under the astonished gaze of the masked man, he sliced him into two. It's that sword! Everyone, be careful! Upon seeing this sight, the surrounding masked men were shocked. In an instant, they recognized the Wuzi steel sword in Wang Chong's hand. Karak Spazinu and the Abbasid Caliphate valued the craftsmanship of swords, and they had spent a great deal of effort on it. Even though the machetes in their hands couldn't compare to Mosaid's, they were still top-notch swords. Only the sword on the Bluebottle Pavilion was capable of severing them with a single slash as though they were weightless. The masked men in black immediately panicked. They had originally not thought much of Wang Chong, but now that they knew about that sword, they immediately felt a great deal of apprehension. Kill! Wang Chong's reaction was extremely sharp. He immediately sensed the panic of his opponents, and this was the best opportunity for him to attack. At this moment, Shen Hai and Meng Long had already developed great trust in Wang Chong. Without a word, the two of them worked together to attack the masked men. The masked men immediately panicked. In the blink of an eye, two of them had already been injured by Shen Hai and Meng Long. However, just as the two of them were about to slaughter the masked men, a sudden change occurred. Peng Peng, the masked men on the other side suddenly threw out a few black balls. These black balls exploded the moment they landed on the ground, and thick smoke filled the air. Not good. Be careful of the bewildering smoke. Wang Chong was alarmed. He couldn't see clearly in the black smoke, and he didn't expect the masked men from Karak Spazinu to carry such hidden weapons. In the instant that he spoke, the black smoke filled the entire area, making it impossible to see anything clearly. Wang Chong's expression changed. Without any time to think, he hurriedly covered his nose with his sleeves and retreated. This is a good chance. Kill him and snatch that sword. As long as we complete the mission, we can ignore the others. Amidst the black smoke, the masked men rejoiced. They actually passed through the thick smoke, as though they weren't affected by it at all. Not good. Wang Chong was astonished. His wings hadn't grown yet, and it was still possible for him to cooperate with Shen Hai and Meng Long to find a few openings. However, facing three powerful Origin Energy Tier 8 experts at the very least, he didn't even need to think about it. Peng! Without any hesitation, Wang Chong immediately tried to flee. Can I make it in time? Little bastard, you dare to leave after killing our men? The three Karak Spazinu masked men had savage expressions on their faces. Wielding sabers in their hands, they followed behind Wang Chong and charged forward. One of the Karak Spazinu experts flicked his wrist, and without any hesitation, a saber flew toward the back of Wang Chong's neck. Gongzi, hurry up and leave. Beasts of Karak Spazinu, with me around, it won't be your turn to act so audaciously. In the blink of an eye, a domineering and deep roar sounded. Just as the masked man flicked his saber, 100 zhang away from Wang Chong, the window opened, and with a loud boom, a thick metal arrow shot out from the window like a burning flame. In an instant, it traversed through the air and struck the saber on Wang Chong's back. Dang! The saber was struck by the thick metal arrow, and with a loud clang, it shattered into pieces. The three masked men were horrified. But before they could react, Peng! Yet another thick metal arrow shot through the air, striking one of the masked men. The thick metal arrow pierced through the side of the masked man's heart. The accuracy of the arrow was frightening. The masked man's body flew into the air before collapsing to the ground like a wooden pillar. Before he could even say a word, he had already breathed his last. Not good. It's an expert archer. The faces of the remaining two masked men warped, as though they had met with something terrifying. Before they could say anything, the two of them suddenly turned around and dashed in two different directions. One of them dashed along the wall while the other climbed up the roof. Pang! Pang! The room 1,000 feet away was like the most terrifying black hole. Before the Karak Spazinu masked man could take more than a few steps, he was pinned to the wall by a thick black metal head that came out of nowhere. As for the other Karak Spazinu masked man, he was already more than 10 feet away. He was about to use the tall roof of the house to block the enemy's line of sight. However, the moment he leapt into the air towards another house, a thick iron arrow suddenly shot out from within, piercing through his neck in one shot. Fresh blood splattered in midair, and the immense force behind the arrow sent the masked man flying more than a dozen zhang away. Eventually, he fell to the ground by the wall of the Wang family residence. In the blink of an eye, the 3 Origin Energy Tier 8 Karak Spazinu masked men were killed cleanly. Tuoba Guyuan. Wang Chong halted his footsteps and turned around. He stared at the pitch-black room 100 zhang away in astonishment. The Karak Spazinu masked men didn't know where that place was, but Wang Chong knew that it was the bearded swordsmith he had taken in not too long ago, Tuoba Guyuan. To think that he's an expert archer. Wang Chong was astonished. In the Tang dynasty, there were 3 prominent occupations on the battlefield. One was the heavy infantry, the other was the archer, and the last one was the cavalry. Wang Chong didn't expect Tuoba Guyuan to be an archer, and from the looks of it, he seemed to be an incredible expert archer. Gongzi, don't worry. With me around, none of them will be able to escape. Tuoba Guyuan's loud and clear voice could be heard from the open window. His voice was deep and steady, and his arrows were like gods. Along with his voice, thick iron arrows were shot out one after another. Thick smoke billowed from the thick iron arrows as they flew out with astonishing force. These thick iron arrows were like the scythe of the Grim Reaper. Wherever Tuoba Guyuan's arrows landed, the masked men would fall to the ground. It didn't matter whether they released the bewildering smoke or escaped. I really found an expert this time. Tuoba Guyuan's archery left Wang Chong in awe. Wang Chong only knew that Tuoba Guyuan was skilled in swordsmithing, but he didn't expect him to be so skilled as well. With such a person around, as well as Ablonadin and Arloja, the 2 experts from Sindhu, the Wang family residence was practically impregnable. It didn't matter how many people came. This is truly an unintentional harvest. Recalling Tuoba Guyuan's astounding archery skills and how Tuoba Guyuan managed to survive the oppression and pursuit of the Zhang, Lu, Huang, and Qin clans in the capital in his previous life, Wang Chong suddenly understood everything. Sheathing the Wuzi steel sword, Wang Chong walked toward Shanhai and Meng Long with widened strides. The 2 of them fell to the ground, unmoving. Chapter 82. Wang Chong dragged the 2 of them to a ventilated area before walking into the room. Retrieving a teapot, he poured some water on their faces and sprinkled some on their noses and mouths. A moment later, the 2 of them slowly regained consciousness. Young master, are you all right? We fainted. The 2 of them were still in a daze. Recalling what happened at the very last moment, their faces were filled with shame. They were all elite soldiers in the army, but in the end, they were defeated by these inferior sleeping gas bombs. If not for the thick smoke and the fact that the 2 of them were lying on the ground, as well as the fact that their attention was on Wang Chong, their heads would have been separated from their bodies by now. There's no need to blame yourselves. Those people came prepared. Putting aside you, even I didn't expect them to bring such a thing. Wang Chong consoled them. You 2 should rest here for a while. The sleeping gas shouldn't be poisonous, so you should be fine after resting for a while. The effects of the sleeping gas bombs were far more formidable than they had imagined. Basically, Shanhai and Meng Long wouldn't be able to fight for the time being. Wang Chong lifted his head to look into the distance. The battle was nearing its end. With Arloja, Ablonadin, and Tuoba Guyuan pincer attacking them, the masked men of Karak Spazinu were defeated much faster than expected. Gongzi, are you all right? The moment the battle ended, Arloja and Ablonadin rushed over anxiously. While the two of them were fighting, the one they were most concerned about was Wang Chong. Wang Chong was the savior of Sinnu. If anything were to happen to him, the two of them wouldn't know how they were going to answer to the high priest. "I'm fine. Did you manage to find anything?" Wang Chong waved his hands casually. "There's nothing else. They have all committed suicide." The two of them replied. The masked men who charged into the Wang family residence died horribly. Some of them knew that they couldn't escape, but they didn't want to be captured alive. Thus, they stabbed the curved blades in their hands into their hearts. "Hurry up and clean up the courtyard. Don't let mother see it." Wang Chong wasn't surprised. Upon seeing a few guards walking over, he instructed them and left. "Is this the sleeping gas bomb?" On the chest of one of the Karak Spazinu masked men, Wang Chong fished out a purplish-brown bewildering smoke grenade the size of a metal ball. Recalling how experts like Shanhai and Meng Long collapsed to the ground the moment they inhaled the bewildering smoke, they were still feeling giddy even now. These guys are not afraid of the sleeping gas at all. They must have swallowed the antidote beforehand. Wang Chong searched again, and sure enough, he found a small bag on the man's waist. There were a few dark purple pills inside, which should be the antidote for the sleeping gas bomb. Wang Chong put these things together with the sleeping gas bombs he had just found into the bag and hung it on his waist. He walked around a few more times before returning to his study. As soon as he entered the room, Wang Chong's eyes narrowed. He immediately felt that something was wrong. There was something wrong with the atmosphere in the room. The window that he had opened when he left was now closed. On the table, the draft paper of the 7-foot-long saber that he had drawn was also gone. Someone has entered. Wang Chong's heart tightened, and he immediately realized that something was amiss. There were so many experts in the courtyard, and there were even Ablonadin, Arloja, and Tuobagueyuan around. Yet, someone was able to sneak into his study without anyone noticing. This person's strength must be fearsome. "Don't move." Wang Chong reacted swiftly. His body tensed up, and just as he was about to leap out, a chill seeped through his body and aimed at his back. "Don't shout, don't scream. Don't expect to attract the monks from the western regions over. They are definitely not as fast as my sword." A cold, emotionless voice came from behind him. The voice was very low. Wang Chong's heart turned cold, and his body immediately froze. The person was a lady. Even though she tried her best to conceal it, Wang Chong could still sense it. Furthermore, the other party's strength was inconceivably high. Even though she was clearly behind him, Wang Chong couldn't sense her location at all. All he could feel was an indistinct aura fusing into the darkness. This aura could only be emitted by a single person. An assassin, and a formidable one at that. "If you want the Wuzi steel sword, you can take it now." Before Wang Chong could finish his words, he heard the sound of footsteps. "Gongzi, are you asleep?" A voice sounded from outside. It was Tuoba Gueyuan's voice, and beside him were Ablonadin and Arloja. "The courtyard has been cleaned up, and all the corpses have been disposed of. None of them escaped. If Gongzi doesn't have any other instructions, we will be heading down to rest. Also, we found a dozen scimitars. Gongzi, how do you intend to deal with them?" Wang Chong fell into a daze. Separated by a wooden door, he suddenly felt an indescribable feeling. In that instant, he suddenly came to a realization. This person's strength was much higher than he had imagined. She had actually sensed Arloja, Ablonadin, and Tuoba Gueyuan walking over together without him noticing. His sudden intrusion caught her off guard, and with Ablonadin, Arloja, and Tuoba Gueyuan walking over together, she had no choice but to restrain him in advance. The darkness was silent. That person didn't say a word, but the chilling aura emanating from the sword behind his back intensified. The meaning behind it was clear. If he were to say a single word more, even if it meant being discovered by Ablonadon, Arloja, and Tuoba Gueyuan, she would kill him immediately. Wang Chang's mind was in turmoil, and his heart was thumping wildly. This was the first time he had encountered such a dangerous situation ever since his reincarnation. This person was more than twice as strong as the black-clothed masked man from Karak Spazinu. Her cultivation had definitely surpassed Origin Energy Tier 9, reaching the true martial realm. Before such an expert, Wang Chong didn't stand much of a chance. Ablonadon, Arloja, and Tuoba Gueyuan were only a single door away from him. If he wanted to seek help, this was his only chance. Wang Chong wanted to seek help, but he wasn't confident that he could dodge the attack from his back. Gongzi. It was pitch black outside the door, and it was impossible to see anything through the door. Tuoba Gueyuan, Arloja, and the others waited for Wang Chong's reply for a long time, and they couldn't help but ask. It felt like an instant, but at the same time, it felt like an eternity. When an even more intense chilling aura emanated from his back, Wang Chong finally regained his senses. This wasn't the time for him to call for help. Most probably, before Ablonadon, Arloja, and the others could barge in, he would already be dead. Since the other party was able to sneak in without anyone noticing, he definitely had the strength to do so. It has been hard on you all tonight. Go and have a good rest. As for those machetes, they are top-notch weapons. Just leave them to Shanhai and Meng Long. Leave them on the weapon rack in the corner of the warehouse. Wang Chong spoke, and a hint of fatigue could be heard in his voice. As expected, the chilling aura behind him subsided, as though it was extremely satisfied with his performance. Yes, Gongzi. The three of them did not seem to have any suspicions. They responded and then turned around. The sound of their footsteps became more and more distant, gradually disappearing into the darkness. As the footsteps of the three faded into the distance, Wang Chong could faintly hear a sneer in the darkness, and his heart sank to the bottom of the lake. I know that you are sent by Mo's aid. Since you have one, you can take the Wuzi steel sword by my waist. I only hope that you can let me go after obtaining the sword. Wang Chong said. He seemed to have completely given up on resisting. As he spoke, he reached for the Wuzi steel sword by his waist. At least you are sensible. A disdainful sneer sounded behind him, but he didn't seem to reject Wang Chong's Wuzi steel sword. You are cheating. Before Wang Chong could retrieve the Wuzi steel sword, the assassin behind him seemed to have noticed something. His eyebrows twitched, and a cold gleam emanated from the tip of his sword. However, the other party realized it too late. The reason why Wang Chong sent Arloja, Ablonadon, and Tuoba Gueyuan away and claimed that he would retrieve the Wuzi steel sword was to lower the other party's guard. Chapter 83. This is bad. After seeing Wang Chong's sleeping gas grenades and seeing him tossing out some hidden weapons, even the courageous assassin in the darkness subconsciously retreated. At the same time, she struck out with her palm, and an explosive shockwave burst forth, deflecting the hidden weapons in the air. I've been fooled by him again. Realizing that nothing had happened to the hidden weapons in the air after being struck, the female assassin flew into a rage. Previously, when Wang Chong presented her with the Wuzi steel sword, he had already fooled her once. This time, she was fooled by Wang Chong with the antidote to the sleeping gas grenades. How could the black-clothed female assassin possibly accept this? In her eyes, Wang Chong's martial arts were beneath average, but he was extremely slippery. If I were to let you escape, I would really be able to commit suicide. Seeing how slippery Wang Chong was, as though a leopard, about to leap out of the window, the female assassin flicked her right hand, and 3 short swords, each around a chi long and as thin as a finger, flew out of the window in front of Wang Chong, sealing off Wang Chong's escape route. If Wang Chong were to forcefully charge out of the window, he would surely die. At the same time, the female assassin's body jolted, and her speed abruptly increased by several folds. As though a specter, she streaked across the air and caught up to Wang Chong in an instant. Chi! A cold gleam flashed across the darkness, and with a clean slash, it flew toward Wang Chong's neck. Spectre steps. Wang Chong was astonished. He suddenly understood how this person managed to get past the heavy guards of the Wang residence and sneak in together with Ablonodon and Arloja. Since he couldn't leap out of the window, Wang Chong immediately used Dragon Coil to stop his momentum. At the same time, he executed the stellar steps and slashed with the Wuzi steel sword. Clang! The crisp sound of metal echoed in the darkness. In an instant, the sword in the hands of the female assassin was severed by Wang Chong's sword. The sharp edge of the sword tore off a piece of her sleeves and left a sharp wound on her fair arm. However, before Wang Chong could chop off the other party's arm, bang! An arm struck Wang Chong's chest, and a huge force gushed out like a flood. In an instant, Wang Chong was sent flying like a kite with a broken string, as if he had suffered a heavy injury. He smashed heavily into the wall with a bang, spitting out a mouthful of blood, and his face was as pale as paper. What a sharp sword! In the darkness, the female assassin raised her hand. There was a faint wound on her arm, and it was incomparably sharp. Glancing at the Wuzi steel sword in Wang Chong's hands, a hint of fear flashed across the female assassin's eyes. I heard that the #1 swordsmith in the world appeared in the Tang dynasty, but I didn't believe it. It seems like it's you. Let me ask you something. Are you able to forge this sword? The female assassin flicked her wrist, and a piece of xian paper appeared in her hands. On it was the 7-chi long narrow saber drawn by Wang Chong. After an intense battle, the female assassin didn't continue pursuing Wang Chong. Instead, she asked about an unimportant drawing. If it was anyone else, they would surely find it bizarre. However, Wang Chong wasn't surprised at all. As Wang Chong glanced at the 3 conical daggers stuck on the windowsill, a thought flashed through his mind. This is fate. Wang Chong sighed. There was no such bizarre weapon in the Central Plains. In fact, in the entire continent, including Karak Spazinu and Abbasid Caliphate, no one knew how to use such a weapon. In Wang Chong's memories, there was only one place that knew how to use such a weapon. In another time-space continuum, that place was known as Japan. In this world, it was known as the 10 Islands of Japan. There were 10 islands in the eastern seas, a place ruled by female supremacy, a place where martial arts were mainly focused on hacking and slashing. Wang Chong didn't expect that the 7-chi long narrow saber he created using the Japanese katana as the foundation would attract the Eastern Islands' female assassin from the same place in this world. All of this seemed to be fated. This was probably the reason why she didn't make a move immediately when he first entered the room. Yes. Even though such thoughts flashed across his mind, Wang Chong replied without the slightest hesitation. Hearing Wang Chong's words, the female assassin stared at Wang Chong, and a complicated expression suddenly appeared in her eyes. But soon, the female assassin regained her cold demeanor. What is hard is easy to break. The longer the sword, the easier it is to break in battle. This saber of yours is 7 chi long, almost as tall as a human. Compared to ordinary swords, it is much easier for it to break. How do you plan to overcome this problem? The female assassin's voice was calm, but there was a chilling killing intent in the air. It felt as though as long as Wang Chong were to give a wrong answer, she would immediately kill him. However, Wang Chong wasn't nervous at all. Ha ha ha, regardless of whether you believe me or not, if I say it's possible, it's naturally possible. Wang Chong chuckled. Immense confidence flowed from his eyes. The longer a sword, the easier it was to break. This was the greatest problem in forging swords and sabers. Before Wang Chong, it wasn't that no one had thought of forging longer swords and sabers. Other than the problem of weight and inconvenience in usage, a bigger problem was that these swords and sabers were much easier to break than ordinary swords and sabers. Just like what this female assassin said, the harder it was, the easier it was to break. If one couldn't solve this problem, forging longer swords and sabers would be meaningless. However, this problem didn't exist for Wang Chong. Wang Chong knew of a unique forging technique that could avoid this problem. This forging technique was known as tempering. It could greatly increase the toughness of a weapon, and by complementing it with some other techniques during the forging process, this problem could be solved. However, Wang Chong wouldn't tell this to the female assassin. In this world, other than Wang Chong, there was no one who knew of this forging technique, needless to say, forging it. This was the unique forging technique that Wang Chong possessed. If not for this confidence, Wang Chong wouldn't have designed such a thick, narrow, and slender saber. The black-clothed female assassin stared intently at Wang Chong, as though trying to peer into his heart to see if he was lying or not. Wang Chong also did not avoid her gaze, openly meeting it without the slightest hesitation. "Humph. The #1 swordsmith in the world, I'll have to trouble you to make a trip with me. As long as you forge a sword like this for me, I might be able to grant you a swift death after this. Don't try to resist, and don't try to shout. You won't get the chance. This time, I'm only throwing you off the wall. The next time, it won't be so simple." As the female assassin spoke, she suddenly raised her right hand and raised the broken sword that was gleaming coldly. At the same time, her left hand reached out to grab the other 3 short swords. She seemed to have made up her mind to kidnap Wang Chong to forge a sword for her alone. Even though her sword had been broken by Wang Chong, the female assassin wasn't worried at all. Wang Chong had already been injured by her palm strike. He wasn't a match for her even when he was at his peak, needless to say, at his current state. Even a broken sword was more than enough for her to deal with him. Clack! With light footsteps, the female assassin walked toward Wang Chong. Her footsteps were calm and firm, as though Wang Chong was already a fish in her palm. "Ha, do you know that you're already at death's door? To think that you would still be in the mood for me to forge a sword for you." Seated on the floor, Wang Chong suddenly chuckled. "There's no need to waste your effort and breath. Do you think that I'll believe you?" The female assassin sneered. Her footsteps didn't stop in the slightest as she walked toward Wang Chong. "Ha, I knew that you would do this. If I'm not wrong, you should be practicing the specter steps, right?" Wang Chong suddenly said with a smile. "Wang." A moment ago, the female assassin was still mocking Wang Chong, but upon hearing the words specter steps, her body trembled and she abruptly came to a halt. The specter steps allows one to traverse through the darkness as though a specter. "You must have relied on this to sneak in, right?" "I don't know where you learned the specter steps from, but do you know that the specter steps is actually in conflict with most cultivation techniques? The more you cultivate this cultivation technique, the closer you are to death. You're already at death's door, and yet you still have the mood to work for others. You even have the mood to kidnap me to forge a sword for you, what a joke." Wang Chong didn't conceal the disdain in his eyes. He looked at the Eastern Islands' female assassin as though he was looking at a dead person. The powerful and wealthy Tang dynasty was like a magnet, attracting all the powers and tribes in the world. Beneath the peaceful surface of the Tang dynasty, there were countless powers lurking in the shadows. This Eastern Islands female assassin was clearly one of them. In order to conceal her identity and not arouse suspicion, she had no idea which faction she had joined to learn this assassination technique. Even though the specter steps was powerful, its flaws were equally huge. Regardless of which power she was recruited by, the other party didn't intend to let her live for too long. "You're spouting nonsense." The Eastern Islands female assassin's face turned cold. The killing intent in the air suddenly intensified by more than tenfold, and the temperature in the room fell abruptly. At this moment, the aura exuded by the Eastern Islands female assassin was completely different from before. Not only was it much stronger, it was as sharp as the edge of a blade. Wang Chong's conjecture wasn't wrong. This female assassin had concealed her true cultivation. Her true strength should be that of the saber. Am I spouting nonsense? Try to circulate your qi according to the specter steps. Circulate your qi through your zifu and shanzhong acupoints to see if you feel any pain. Leaning against the wall, Wang Chong sneered coldly. Wang. Even though the female assassin said that she didn't believe him, her body subconsciously began to circulate according to Wang Chong's instructions. Wang, a dense black aura gushed out from her body. In an instant, the female assassin's silhouette blurred as though a phantom, as though fusing with the darkness. But the next moment, with a dull grunt, the black aura dissipated, and the female assassin appeared in the room once more. Her face was incomparably pale, and cold sweat was dripping down her forehead. Her cold, emotionless, and composed eyes swiftly glanced at Wang Chong. For the first time, panic appeared on her face. Wang Chong was right. When her jinqi flowed through her zifu and shanzhong acupoints, she really felt a sharp pain in her juk and fengzi acupoints. The jinqi in her body nearly dissipated. This is a good chance. Just as the female assassin was panicking, Wang Chong slapped the ground with his palm and leaped into the air. Executing Dragon Ascending the Clouds, his body was as agile as a serpent as he leaped out of the window without any hesitation. Chapter 84. Where do you think you're going? The female assassin's heart turned cold. Her target this time was Wang Chong. Regardless of whether it was to kill him or to have him forge a sword for her, she couldn't allow him to escape. Pang! Enduring the pain in her body, the female assassin hurriedly chased after Wang Chong. Outside the window, the moonlight shone brightly. She could see a figure as agile as a serpent dashing toward the Wang family residence's warehouse. The female assassin's face turned cold. Without any hesitation, she immediately chased after Wang Chong. But just as she was several zhang away from the female assassin, a black gleam flashed, and a massive steel arrow carrying a powerful might flew toward the female assassin's face at the speed of lightning. Boom! In an instant, the female assassin was only able to raise her broken sword before her body to block the attack. Then, she was struck by the thick metal arrow and was sent flying. Tuoba Guiyuan, masters, hurry up and stop her. Don't let her escape. As Wang Chong dashed along the grass, he bellowed loudly. The first half of his sentence was in Mandarin, but the second half was in Sanskrit. Roar! Female benefactor, stay behind. Arloja and Ablonidon roared furiously. Black smoke billowed from their bodies, and as though two arrows leaving the bow, they charged forward. Peng peng. In a short period of time, the three powerful shockwaves collided with one another. The shockwaves from the explosion even affected Wang Chong, who was a dozen zhang away. When Wang Chong turned around, he saw Arloja and Ablonidon's robes puffing up. Their bodies wavered, and they retreated several steps. On the other hand, the female assassin also made use of this opportunity to charge out. In midair, she deflected Ba Guiyuan's thick metal arrow with an arrow before her figure blurred. Executing the specter's steps once more, her figure morphed into a blurry shadow and darted into the shadows at the corner of the wall. Lad! This matter isn't over yet. That hateful voice sounded from the darkness, and it sounded as though her teeth were about to shatter. In the blink of an eye, the Eastern Island's female assassin disappeared from sight. That fellow's strength is incredible. Upon seeing this sight, Wang Chong was astonished. He had witnessed Arloja and Ablonidon's strength before. For this female assassin to be able to fight against the two of them at the same time, her strength was truly astonishing. Young master, who is this woman? She's so strong, even two of my arrows couldn't hurt her. Tuoba Guiyuan rushed over with an arrow on his back. The most basic requirement for an archer was to have a keen eye, and Tuoba Guiyuan was an expert in this field. However, after the other party executed the specter steps, Tuoba Guiyuan was unable to identify her. Is it that merchant from the western regions, Mozaid? This guy is so cunning. Wang Chong pushed open the door, and just as he stepped over the threshold, the world suddenly shook. An intense bout of dizziness struck his head. Before Wang Chong could react, he felt the world around him changing. In an instant, it felt as though countless things were pressing down on him. That kind of heavy pressure was almost suffocating. Warning! Warning! The first world constraint has arrived. Before Wang Chong could even react, the world before him had already begun to churn. An endless torrent of energy surged toward him with the might of a thunderbolt. In the midst of this torrent of energy, Wang Chong seemed as insignificant as an ant. Pang! Wang Chong's right knee caved in, and he fell to the ground. At the same time, Wang Chong could vaguely hear a rumbling in his body. A bizarre but resilient energy burst forth from his body, forming a faint yellow barrier that shielded Wang Chong's body. Boom! The surging torrent of energy surged past Wang Chong's body like a tidal wave. The faint yellow barrier around Wang Chong's body shattered with a pop, taking away all of Wang Chong's stamina. Who? Wang Chong's face was pale, and he sat on the ground. His entire body was drenched in sweat. Gongzi, what's wrong? A Sanskrit voice came from next door. It was Ablonidon. I'm fine. Wang Chong replied weakly. Everything before him returned to normal. The heavy pressure and the feeling of the world crashing down on him only lasted for an instant before disappearing. The room was dark and silent. The world's shackles had passed. Masters, did you two see anything just now? Or did you discover anything? Wang Chong panted for breath and said after a moment of silence. No, I only heard that you fell. It was Ablonidon's voice, and there was a hint of doubt in his voice. For some reason, Wang Chong's voice had become exceptionally weak. However, recalling how Wang Chong had just survived the assault of a female assassin, he felt relieved and didn't think too much about it. Oblivious to Ablonidon and Arloja, in the other room, Wang Chong was taken aback upon hearing their reply. All of a sudden, he seemed to have come to a realization. So, I'm the only one who could see such a huge commotion. Wang Chong fell into deep thought. Regardless of whether it was the powerful torrent of energy or the faint yellow barrier around him, other than him, Ablonidon, Arloja, and the others were unaware of such a huge commotion. Wang Chong suddenly realized that the power of the world was directed at him. The world constraint had already surpassed the capabilities of an ordinary cultivator. Even Ablonidon and Arloja weren't able to sense it. Chapter 85. This was the first time Wang Chong had experienced the world-binding force, or rather, the repulsive force. It felt as though he was not tolerated by the entire world. In front of that majestic power, Wang Chong could deeply feel how insignificant he was, and his heart palpitated. In reality, it was not just him. Wang Chong believed that any warrior would be as insignificant as an ant in front of this torrent of heaven and earth. On the collapsed bed, Wang Chong sat on the ground, panting heavily, sweat pouring down his forehead like rain. So this is the price of reincarnating, to become the enemy of the entire world. If not for the stone of destiny, I would have been crushed into powder long ago. Wang Chong closed his eyes, thinking silently, and a bitter smile appeared on his face. At this moment, Wang Chong suddenly understood what kind of predicament reincarnating would face in this universe. Right now, the stone of destiny was his only hope. The torrent of heaven and earth was endless, as though a flood was crashing down on him. However, the faint light emitted by the stone of destiny was like a shelter in the midst of a storm, helping him escape this crisis. The 20 destiny energy should have been used up by now. This is only the first wave. This thought flashed through Wang Chong's mind, and the next moment, Wang Chong saw the stone of destiny in his mind. Warning. Destiny energy remaining, 5 points. Duration of the next world binding force, 3 months. Destiny energy required, 30 points. Looking at this string of information, Wang Chong laughed bitterly in his heart. It was exactly as he had expected. However, the next time, the amount of destiny energy required to resist the world-binding force was not 25 points, but 30 points. After sitting on the ground for a while, as his stamina recovered, a strange feeling slowly spread throughout his body. A power that he had never felt before was suddenly released from his hair follicles, skin, and muscles all over his body. Wang Chong felt that while his stamina was recovering, his strength was also increasing. Not only that, this energy seemed to have a very strong penetrative ability. It began to penetrate through his skin and muscles, seeping into his bones and marrow, and began to automatically strengthen Wang Chong's bones, meridians, and even muscles. This is... Wang Chong's heart skipped a beat as he suddenly came to a realization. Wasn't this what the Stone of Fate had mentioned before? Every time he resisted the world restriction, his body would be strengthened. Thinking of this, Wang Chong was overjoyed. He jumped up from the ground and quickly executed the astral steps, practicing the heavy punch method. Bang, bang, bang. Strong winds blew in all directions in the room, and waves of air burst out like a tidal wave. As expected. When Wang Chong practiced the heavy punch, the speed at which the dissipating energy permeated his body increased tremendously. Under the transformation of this energy, Wang Chong could feel the bones in his body absorbing nutrients from his blood, rapidly becoming denser. As expected, could this energy be the dissipating energy of the world? Wang Chong was delighted. Recalling the surging energy of the world, could it be that when the faint yellow barrier formed by the energy of destiny broke apart, it captured some of the dissipating energy of the world and sent it back to him? Now that I think about it, the world restriction isn't that bad after all. Wang Chong chuckled. Becoming one with his mind, he hastened the cultivation of the heavy punch. Time slowly passed, and it was hard to tell how many days had passed. Kacha! Wang Chong suddenly heard the crisp sound of his bones exploding. Somehow, he seemed to have broken through a bottleneck, and Wang Chong felt his strength rising by a large margin in an instant. Panther Bone 2 Dan. Wang Chong was overjoyed. He felt refreshed. Not only had he recovered to his peak, he had also recovered from the internal injuries he suffered from the Eastern Islands' female assassin's attack. Furthermore, his strength had also risen by a notch. With the success of Panther Bone 2 Dan, it was only a matter of time before he reached Origin Energy Tier 6. Wang Chong was overjoyed, and he only fell into a deep sleep when it was nearing dawn. Mother, I'm back. The next day, just as he was having his meal, the sound of bouncing could be heard. Pang! The door was pushed open, and his little sister barged in. Her hair was tied into a ponytail, and she was munching on a fragrant chicken drumstick. It was hard to tell if she had brought it from her cousin's place. Brother, I heard that some baddies came to our house last night. Where are they? Where are they? Let me give them a good beating. As the Wang family's little sister spoke, she looked around furiously. Then, she raised her fair and tender fists, as though flaunting her prowess. You spend all day at cousin's place, and you still have the time to come back? By the time you return, they would have already left. Wang Chong glanced at his little sister and said impatiently. After not seeing her for a few days, his little sister seemed to have changed completely. She had a rattle drum by her waist, a pair of embroidered shoes with silver bells on them, and a kite on her back. It seemed like his little sister hadn't been slacking off when he gave her the 100 gold taels. She had taken the money and spent it, freely, for a period of time. Hearing Wang Chong's words, Wang Xiaoyao stuck out her tongue and hurriedly ran to her mother's side. Her eyes darted around the room, and soon, she picked up a pair of chopsticks, stabbed a roasted goose on the table, and began munching on it. Gluttonous and playful. You haven't changed at all. Wang Chong shook his head. Looking at his little sister, he felt helpless. Given his little sister's talent, if she had spent some time on cultivation, how could she have reached such a low cultivation realm? There probably wouldn't be many people in the capital who could match her. However, his little sister was only 10 years old, and she was a gluttonous and playful person. Wang Chong couldn't change that. His little sister didn't return alone. Together with her were a few experts sent over by cousin Wang Zhuyan. They were the true experts of his big uncle's residence. Wang Chong arranged for them to stay near his mother's residence and guarded her day and night. Right, little brother. After the meal, his little sister suddenly beamed with joy. Tilting her head, she fawned, "I heard from Shanhai and Meng Long that you earned 600,000 gold taels. Let me take a look, let me take a look." As she spoke, she shook Wang Chong's arm with a pleading look on her face. "I knew that you would do this." Wang Chong chuckled, but he didn't reject her. Instead, a doting look appeared on his face. "Let's go, I'll bring you to take a look." In the Wang family's storehouse, Wang Xiaoyao's eyes were filled with stars upon seeing the mountain of gold. "Wah, little brother, we're rich." The Wang family's little sister pounced over excitedly and started rolling on the pile of gold. As she rolled, she exclaimed excitedly, "So much gold, so much gold. How much delicious food can we buy with this?" Everything was fine at the start, but at the end, it was all about food. Just as the matter of the Wang clan being assaulted was causing a huge commotion, a shocking matter occurred in the royal court, the consort Taizhen incident. The Son of Heaven, the Holy Emperor, was determined to bring consort Taizhen into the royal palace. In the royal court, the King of Song, King Qi, the Yao clan, the Wang clan, the Duke of Su, the Duke of Wei, the Duke of Zhao. All of the civil and military officials were embroiled in the matter. This included Wang Chong's big uncle, Wang General. The entire royal court was torn into two. Half supported the matter while the other half opposed it. This became the most sensational matter in the past few decades of the Tang dynasty. Regardless of whether they supported the matter or opposed it, their emotions were extremely intense. As a result, the atmosphere in the royal court became extremely tense. In fact, there were even two physicians who fought in the royal court, resulting in them bleeding profusely. In the end, both of them were imprisoned in the imperial prison of the Court of Judicial Review. At the same time, the entire Central Plains was in a state of turmoil. Everyone's gaze was drawn to the royal court. Wang Chong received the news while he was cultivating at home. Upon hearing the news from the royal court, Wang Chong fell silent for a very long time. To think that such a matter would still happen. Wang Chong raised his head. The sky was overcast, and there was an indescribable pressure in it. Looking at the gloomy sky, a hint of worry flashed across Wang Chong's eyes. There were many things in this world that were different from what he remembered. But regardless of which time-space continuum he was in, the death of Consort Wu in 740, and the wise and formidable Holy Emperor in the history of the Tang dynasty ordered Consort Shou to become a nun, as well as the Consort Taizhen incident that brought her into the royal palace, all of this had a significant impact on the world. No one could understand why the wise and valiant sage emperor, who had spent the first half of his life forging ahead, the greatest person in Great Tang, even the Central Plains, would have such a drastic change in his personality, going against the principles of morality and bringing Consort Taizhen into the palace. Thinking about it carefully, even now, Wang Chong still couldn't understand why. This was definitely not the actions of a holy emperor, but the impact and consequences of this incident were extremely far-reaching. The Wang clan's backer, His Highness the King of Song, who wielded immense authority and influence in the royal court, had displeased the holy emperor due to his vehement opposition to this matter. As a result, he fell out of favor and was expelled from the royal court. Losing the backing of the King of Song was a heavy blow to the Wang clan. What was even worse was that the Wang clan had also chosen the wrong side in this political storm. Everyone had underestimated the Holy Emperor's determination in this matter. And the price of the Wang clan's underestimation was that they had suffered a huge blow in this matter. Since then, they had never recovered. Be it in terms of power, status, or influence, they had all been greatly weakened, and they had been completely eliminated from the first echelon of the Tang dynasty. In a political battle, one wrong step and one wrong side would have such a cruel price to pay. For the Wang clan, this was a huge crisis. However, in the entire Wang clan, apart from Wang Chong, no one knew the future direction of the Wang clan. Although he understood, Wang Chong knew that there was nothing he could do now. The impact of this storm in the royal court was unprecedented, and it was not something that a 15-year-old child like him could decide. I can only wait until Grandpa's birthday. At that time, the King of Song will definitely go to Grandpa and ask for his support. In the royal court of the Tang dynasty, old Master Yao of the Yao clan and his own grandfather were two obstacles that could not be avoided. In any major event in the royal court, their opinions had a decisive effect. Wang Chong knew that the King of Song would definitely ask for his grandfather's opinion during the birthday celebration. Suppressing his thoughts, Wang Chong continued to practice. Chapter 86. Days passed one after another, and in the Wang family residence, a figure danced around swiftly. Dragon ascending the clouds. Dragon submerging the waves. Dragon swallowing the water. Dragon exhaling the waves. Wang Chong's figure was agile and lively. He executed a simple dragon bone art fist art, and as though a serpentine dragon, he darted through the fake mountains and forests. This had already surpassed the limits of an ordinary fist art. Instead, it had reached the level of being able to utilize one's own will. Even the guards of the Wang family couldn't help but stare at Wang Chong. No one knew where the third young master learned this fist art from, and no one cared about it either. To the Wang family, after witnessing the third young master's ability to amass more than 600,000 gold taels in such a short period of time, this was nothing at all. By now, no one was surprised by it. In the courtyard, Wang Chong's movement technique grew faster and faster. The air around him surged as though a tidal wave, and fallen leaves were swept up by Wang Chong. However, they didn't fall to the ground. Instead, as though small boats in the sea, they flowed along the air currents around Wang Chong. This was the sign of mastering the Herculean fist art. It's about time. A thought flashed across Wang Chong's mind, and the blood in his body flowed faster and faster. He had a feeling that he would be able to reach Origin Energy Tier 6 today. Peng peng peng. Surges of air currents exploded around Wang Chong. After an unknown period of time. Boom! Wang Chong's body jolted, and a surge of origin energy burst forth from his body. As though a bottleneck had been broken, endless origin energy gushed in from the surroundings and gushed into Wang Chong's body. Kacha kacha, the crisp sound of his joints echoed throughout his body. Under the boost of the origin energy from the surroundings, Wang Chong's strength burst forth, and in the blink of an eye, he broke through from Origin Energy Tier 5 to Origin Energy Tier 6. Ha ha ha, the Heaven's Gate is open. I've finally reached Origin Energy Tier 6. Wang Chong was overjoyed. It was rare for Wang Chong to be so excited, but it was different this time. In martial arts, there was a saying called, Heavenly Gate. This, Heavenly Gate, was not the 100 acupuncture points on the top of the head, but the bottleneck between the human body and the outside world. Upon reaching Origin Energy Tier 6, one would be able to break through this bottleneck and absorb origin energy from the outside world. This was the greatest difference between Origin Energy Tier 5 and Origin Energy Tier 6. For example, the first 5 tiers of Origin Energy Tier 9 were all for the purpose of opening the Heaven's Gate. Once a martial artist reached Origin Energy Tier 6, they would be able to cultivate secret arts that could greatly enhance their strength, agility, and speed. For example, the Spectre Steps of the Eastern Islands Female Assassin was a speed-type secret art after reaching Origin Energy Tier 6. It was impossible for one to learn such a powerful secret art before reaching Origin Energy Tier 5. To Wang Chong, that wasn't all. Once he reached Origin Energy Tier 6, Wang Chong would be able to maneuver around even more freely. Even though he was the Grand Marshal of the Central Plains in his previous life, he had lost all of his cultivation. Thus, Wang Chong could only start over from scratch. The Origin Gate is open was a good start for Wang Chong. If Wang Chong's limbs were bound in the past, Wang Chong now had a free hand. Boom! With a thought, Wang Chong punched out with his right fist, and in that instant, something inconceivable happened. Kacha, the bones in Wang Chong's body creaked, and his right arm suddenly grew to twice its original length. He reached his hand into the crevice of a fake mountain, and pang, the rock weighing more than 100 jin was lifted up. In Wang Chong's hand, a rock weighing more than 100 jin was as light as a feather. This was the ability of Origin Energy Tier 6. Upon reaching this level, a martial artist's fighting prowess would be greatly enhanced. For a rock weighing more than 100 jin to be as light as a feather, this was something that ordinary people couldn't compare to. Ha ha ha, this is what they say. Gongzi's intelligence is truly incredible. We have only exchanged a few blows, but Gongzi is already able to grasp the arm-length fist in one fell swoop. In the corridor by the side, Arloja and Ablonadon walked down the stairs with their sleeves fluttering in the wind. The two of them nodded their heads in delight. Arm-length fist was a secret art of Sindhu. Different from the martial arts of the Central Plains, Sindhu was known for its bizarre nature. Upon mastering this arm-length fist, one's arm would be able to move from one side to the other, allowing one to catch one's opponent off guard. This was also a Sindhu martial art that the two of them had imparted to Wang Chong according to Wang Chong's current cultivation realm. They thought that it would take a long time, but to think that Wang Chong's improvement would be faster than they had expected. I have to thank the two masters for your guidance. Wang Chong smiled and walked over. In another world, there was a saying that Bodhidharma traveled east to impart martial arts. As such, Wang Chong had always been curious about the Sindhu martial arts of this world. Due to the famine and poverty in Sindhu, the overall standard of martial arts couldn't compare to that of the Central Plains. However, that didn't mean that it didn't have its strengths. Of all the martial arts in Sindhu, the one that Wang Chong was most curious about was the tortoise-breathing art. It was said that this was the secret art of the Sindhu monks. After mastering this secret art, one could bury themselves deep in the ground for 10 days and 10 nights without eating, drinking, or breathing, and nothing would happen to them. Some of the more formidable Sindhi sadhus could even remain motionless underground for 3 months or even several years, as if they were dead. In his previous life, this was the Sindhu martial art that Wang Chong wanted to learn the most, but he didn't have the chance to do so. Now that he had met Arloja and Ablonadon, how could Wang Chong let go of this opportunity? Arloja and Ablonadon spoke of everything they knew. The only problem was that Wang Chong wasn't able to learn it with his current cultivation. Hong long long. Just as they were speaking, the rumbling of a carriage sounded from the front door. From the carriage, his little sister's excited voice could be heard clearly. "Brother, it's time to set off. It's grandfather's birthday. Mother wants us to go to the Four Quarters Embassy right now." "I got it. I'm coming." Hearing his little sister's loud voice reverberating through the entire Wang family residence, Wang Chong chuckled. A look of anticipation flashed in his eyes. Regardless of the storm outside, the entire Wang family residence was in a joyous mood today. Bright red lanterns were hung on the eaves of all of the houses. Many places were even painted with redwood paint, creating a festive atmosphere. Grandfather's 70th birthday was a huge occasion for the entire Wang clan. Other than Wang Chong's father, who was stationed by the borders, everyone else, including Big Uncle, Big Aunt, and Little Uncle, would be attending grandfather's birthday. Naturally, Wang Chong was the same as well. There were 365 days in a year, and this was the only day that Wang Chong could enter the Four Quarters Embassy to visit his grandfather. Even though he felt helpless, the Wang clan wasn't unique to a clan of generals and ministers. Where there was gain, there was bound to be loss. Masters, I'll be leaving first. Wang Chong said in Sanskrit. Gongzi, we won't be accompanying you. Arloja and Ablanadin replied respectfully. The Four Quarters Embassy was a forbidden ground of the Tang dynasty, and it was heavily guarded by the experts of the imperial army. Even descendants of the Wang clan like Wang Chong weren't allowed to enter easily, needless to say, Sindhi Buddhist monks like Arloja and Ablanadin. Wang Chong nodded. With his little sister around, the Wang clan's guards, and even the experts of the imperial army, he didn't have to worry about any accidents happening in broad daylight. Wang Chong began walking out. Outside the gates of the Wang family residence, a bright red carriage stopped. His mother and little sister were on it. Wang Chong dived into the carriage, and it slowly drove off. You two siblings, listen up. Chonger, you have to listen up as well. Today is grandfather's birthday, and other than us, many of your grandfather's old subordinates are coming over. When we reach there, speak less, eat more, and observe more. Don't cause any trouble for me. Whenever it was her father-in-law's birthday, Zhao Shuhua would be extremely nervous. In the family, even though she had the final say. But everyone knew that the backbone of the Wang clan, the true person at the helm, was actually eunuch Wang. Her father-in-law had led a glorious life, and he was doted on by the holy emperor. The reason why the Wang clan was able to become a clan of generals and ministers was due to her father-in-law's contributions. In the Wang clan, her father-in-law wielded unparalleled authority. Zhao Shuhua had always been respectful and fearful of Gongzi. In truth, she wasn't the only one. The other sisters-in-law were the same as well. Mother, don't worry. I know what to do. Wang Chong patted his mother's back and consoled her. That's right, what is there for grandfather to be afraid of? I'm not afraid at all. Wang family's little Yao pouted. Hearing his little sister's words, Wang Chong and his mother smiled bitterly. In the Wang clan, grandfather had always been extremely strict. Regardless of whether it was his big brother, second brother, or cousin, they had all been reprimanded by grandfather. Even Wang Chong himself was the same in his previous life. The only exception was probably his little sister. For some reason, regardless of whether it was grandfather or grandmother, they were extremely fond of this little sister of theirs. At this age, grandfather had never scolded her before. Every time they saw his little sister, the two elders would chuckle happily. This made Wang Chong, his big brothers, and cousin incomparably jealous. But there was nothing they could do. His little sister was a magnet for affection. Furthermore, other than gluttony, girls were playful. They wouldn't cause any trouble. The carriage passed through the streets and alleys, heading toward the east. Several hours later, seated in the carriage, Wang Chong suddenly felt a majestic aura crushing down on him, as though a tidal wave. In that instant, Wang Chong felt as though he was facing a torrent of the world. We've arrived at the Four Quarters Embassy. Wang Chong immediately realized what was going on. He had been to the Four Quarters Embassy before, so this aura was extremely familiar to Wang Chong. Shua! Parting the curtains, Wang Chong gazed into the distance. Not too far away, a massive residence stood before him. The residence was square-shaped, and it was 7 to 8 times the size of an ordinary general or minister clan. It looked extremely simple, but it exuded an incomparably solemn and dignified aura. Anyone who walked by this place couldn't help but feel a sense of respect and reverence. They would lower their voices and slow their footsteps, as though fearing that they would alarm the person within. There wasn't a single person in the vicinity of the residence, not even a single house. Above the main gate of the residence, Wang Chong saw a simple signboard. On the signboard were 3 large words painted in black on a white background. The words were bold and forceful, as if they were bursting out of the paper, like a true dragon soaring into the sky, affecting the world. This was the Four Quarters Embassy. Chapter 87. The Four Quarters Embassy was quiet, but Wang Chong knew that it was one of the most heavily guarded places in the Central Plains. Countless Imperial Army experts were stationed here. Looking from afar, even the air above the Four Quarters Embassy seemed slightly distorted, and even the sun, moon, and stars seemed a little bizarre. The Four Quarters Embassy looked simple, and one could easily climb over the walls. However, one would realize that this place was definitely a tiger's den. One might be able to enter easily, but there was no guarantee that one would be able to come out alive. Every time Wang Chong entered this place, he would feel as though he had stepped into an impenetrable fortress. To think that I would finally be back here. Looking at the Four Quarters Embassy, Wang Chong was in a daze. A complicated expression flashed across his eyes. Wang Chong had always disliked the Four Quarters Embassy. The reason was simple. The atmosphere here was too solemn. Every time he entered this place, it didn't feel like a family gathering. Instead, it felt more like a court assembly. Furthermore, grandfather, or perhaps the old master, this was how Wang Chong addressed him in his heart, was too upright and incorruptible. Wang Chong's rebelliousness, ignorance, and troublemaking didn't appeal to the old master. As a result, Wang Chong felt as though he was invisible every time he came here. No one paid attention to him, and no one cared about him. Due to this reason, Wang Chong disliked coming here even more. There were many things that one would only realize their importance after losing them. It was only after the old master passed away that Wang Chong truly felt the weight of the old master. The entire Wang clan lost its pillar of support, and in an instant, the world collapsed. Only then did Wang Chong realize what the old master meant to the clan. Humans had to learn from their mistakes in order to grow. Many years later, when Wang Chong was no longer young, Wang Chong finally understood his grandfather's intentions. He had lived an upright and incorruptible life. Wealth, status, and authority held no attraction to him at all. No one disliked having a house full of grandchildren, and no one disliked enjoying a blissful old age. The reason why he persisted for so long in the Four Quarters Embassy despite his old age was for this family, for the descendants of the Wang clan. Thus, in his previous life, when he revisited the Four Quarters Embassy many years later, the Four Quarters Embassy was no longer guarded by the Imperial Army, and it was overgrown with weeds, turning it into an ordinary courtyard. Big Uncle and Little Uncle kneeled on the ground and burst into tears. That scene was something that Wang Chong would never forget for the rest of his life. In the past, Wang Chong was filled with awe and respect for this place, but as someone who had reincarnated, Wang Chong's feelings toward this place were completely different. It wasn't just the intimacy that flowed through his bloodline. To Wang Chong, this place also contained a sliver of hope for the empire. If Wang Chong wanted to change the fate of the empire, change the fate of the Central Plains, he needed the approval and help of that elder in the Four Quarters courtyard. This was Wang Chong's only chance. Jaya! A shout sounded from outside the carriage. Wang Chong's eyes widened for a moment, but he soon recovered. Retracting his head, he sat on the carriage with his mother and slowly headed toward the Four Quarters Embassy. This wasn't the first time the Wang clan's carriage had entered the Four Quarters Embassy. Even in the Tang dynasty, there were few who didn't recognize the emblem on the carriage. However, they still had to go through strict procedures to verify it before allowing it in. Let's alight here. If Duke Zhou summons you, he'll inform you. Not too far after entering the Four Quarters Embassy, several Imperial Army soldiers stood guard. Several black-armored Imperial Army soldiers had grim and expressionless faces, blocking the way. This was the periphery of the Four Quarters Embassy. Even though they were from the Wang clan, they could only walk this far. They had to wait for the summons from inside. Even though Wang Chong wasn't used to this, he knew that this was a rule set by the Holy Emperor. But Wang Chong knew that this was a rule set down by the Sage Emperor to prevent people from trying to take advantage of the chaos and sneak in. The Holy Emperor viewed the Four Quarters Embassy with great importance. All of you wait here. Big Ant and the others will be here soon, and we'll all enter together. Remember not to run around. Madame Wang instructed from the carriage. She was already used to all of this, so she wasn't surprised by it. Wang Chong and his little sister nodded their heads before opening the carriage door and alighting. The Four Quarters Embassy was heavily guarded. With a single glance, one could see a sentry every 5 steps and a sentry every 10. There were Imperial Army guards everywhere, both in the open and in the shadows. These gazes scanned the area silently from all directions, and it felt as though one was being watched at all times. In his previous life, Wang Chong had always felt uncomfortable being watched. However, having lived 2 lives, Wang Chong had weathered many storms, so he didn't mind such surveillance. "Mother, let me help you down." Wang Chong stood by the side of the carriage and helped his mother down. Madame Wang nodded her head in gratification. This child had truly grown up. If it was in the past, he wouldn't have been so sensible. Disregarding the Imperial Army guards, the interior of the Four Quarters Embassy was actually quite beautiful. The interior of the Four Quarters Embassy was filled with lush greenery, and between the trees, neatly paved bluestone paths could be seen. By the sides of the paths, there were many craggy artificial mountains and boulders that exuded an ancient charm. Clear streams of flowing water, carefully constructed by the Bureau of Works, flowed through the surroundings. Wang Chong glanced around, and he could even see clusters of meticulously cultivated black bamboos. They were lush and vigorous, exuding vitality. The old master loved peace and quiet, and he was skilled in both literature and martial arts when he was young. These were all things that he liked. Luolulu. Just as he was waiting, the rumbling of a carriage sounded from behind him. "Yo, isn't this Shu Hua? You sure came early. It's father-in-law's birthday, Shu Hua, you sure put in a lot of effort." Before Wang Chong could see the person, a sarcastic and eccentric voice sounded from the green carriage. Wang Chong turned his head and saw a middle-aged woman with a hairpin and an air of nobility poking her head out of the carriage window. Her eyes were staring at him with a hint of harshness in them. Big Aunt. A thought flashed across Wang Chong's mind. The person who peeked her head out from the carriage was none other than Wang Chong's big aunt, Xing Yuan Chun. If Big Uncle had always been fond of him in his previous life, Big Aunt hated him. This kind of hatred wasn't limited to just Wang Chong, but the entire Wang clan. Big brother, second brother, father, mother, and little sister were all included. In fact, even after the Wang clan fell into trouble, Big Aunt's attitude hadn't changed at all. When the Wang clan was in trouble, everyone was more than willing to work together. Even though they were starving, Big Aunt was always nagging at them. When it was time to eat, she made sure to eat the best. And when it was time to pick out food, she made sure to pick the largest portion. When the Wang clan fell into trouble, everyone was skinny, but Big Aunt even gained a few caddies. Due to this reason, she and Wang Chong hated one another. Sister-in-law must be joking. Today is father-in-law's birthday, so how could Shu Hua dare to be late? Hearing her brother and sister-in-law's words, Madame Wang's face darkened, but she didn't dare to refute them. Xing Yuan Chun was the daughter-in-law of the Wang clan's first wife. In the feudal society, her status was much higher than hers. "Mother, why are you being so courteous with her?" "Big Aunt, today is grandfather's 70th birthday. As an elder, you actually came so late for such an important event. Aren't you being a little too negligent?" Wang Chong tugged at his mother and retorted rudely. His mother couldn't speak, but as a child, he didn't have much to fear. Even if grandfather were to blame him, he would only say that he was inexperienced and that it wasn't a big deal. That's right, that's right. Why are you scolding my mother?" His little sister clenched her fists and argued indignantly. "You!" Xing Yuan Chun didn't expect Wang Chong to interject and criticize her for being late. She angrily pointed a finger at Wang Chong and said with a frosty face, "You too, little things, do you still have any respect for your elders? How dare you speak like that? I'm speaking with your mother, do you have the right to interrupt? Zhao Shuhua, is this how you teach your children? Enough. At this moment, a cold and authoritative voice sounded from the carriage. The quarreling trio immediately quietened down. Today is father's birthday, so no one is allowed to argue here. Xing Yuan Chun, shut your mouth. Wang Chong, you're not allowed to speak as well. It was Wang Chong's big uncle, Wang General. As an influential official of the royal court, his words carried an air of authority. Yes, big uncle. Wang Chong bowed and fell silent. Compared to before, big uncle's tone was much more relaxed, and he didn't seem to be blaming Wang Chong. Clearly, Wang Chong's suggestion to help big uncle and cousin wasn't in vain. But for some reason, Wang Chong felt that there was something weighing heavily on his big uncle's mind when he spoke. Big brother is right. Shu Hua has been rude. Wang Chong's mother, Zhao Shu Hua, also bowed. Even though Wang Chong's big uncle Wang Zhen was strict and inflexible, and he didn't have a good relationship with the Wang clan in the past, he wasn't as harsh and arrogant as Xing Yuan Chun. Thus, there wasn't much conflict between him and Wang Chong's mother. Wang Zhen. Your elbows are out. Do you even know how to talk? She's talking back to me. A sharp and discordant voice sounded from the carriage. Even though big uncle Wang Zhen was speaking up, Wang Chong's big aunt, Xing Yuan Chun, didn't buy it, and her voice was filled with dissatisfaction. Mother, stop. At this moment, another voice from the carriage grumbled. It's cousin. Wang Chong could tell that it was his grandfather's 70th birthday. It was impossible for cousin Wang Zhuyan to miss out on such a huge occasion. Fine. To think that even you would speak up for an outsider. Stinky lass, I'll teach you a lesson. Big Aunt's face was filled with anger, and as she spoke, she stretched out her finger to pinch her cheek. Following which, a scream of shock sounded from her cousin, as though she was really pinched in pain. Then, a series of nagging reprimands followed. Yo, isn't that Shu Hua? There's also Yuan Chun. Wang Li was the eldest son of the Wang clan, and he was an official as well. The old master had once bestowed a special favor upon him, so the imperial army guards didn't even bother to look at him before allowing him to leave. In the blink of an eye, Wang Li disappeared into the bamboo forest. Throughout the entire process, no one spared him a second glance. It should be something from before, a thought flashed across Wang Chong's mind. No one knew better than him just how ambitious cousin Wang Li was in his desire for fame and glory. In the third generation, cousin Wang Li had always been competing with his two elder brothers, especially his eldest brother. Just that, despite being the eldest son of the Wang clan, cousin Wang Li had never been a match for his eldest brother, Wang Fu. Even his official rank couldn't compare to his eldest brother. Due to the Yao clan, his promotion was ruined. It was easy to imagine cousin Wang Li's emotions. This child, Big Aunt Xing Yuan Chun, stared at cousin Wang Li's disappearing silhouette in embarrassment. Enough. Let's stop talking and get off the carriage. It was big uncle Wang Zhen's voice. As soon as he said those words, he stood up and walked out of the carriage. Before coming out, he glanced at Wang Chong and nodded his head. Then, with a troubled look on his face, he walked forward. As the eldest son of the Wang clan and an influential official in the royal court, Big Uncle would often visit the Four Quarters Embassy to consult the old master on political issues. As such, he was an exception to the rules of the Four Quarters Embassy. In just a moment, Big Uncle passed through the security barrier and disappeared into the bamboo forest. Ru Shuang, let's go in as well. There's no need for that. I'll wait for fourth brother here. It's rare for him to return from Tianzhu Mountain for the old master's birthday banquet. Let's wait for him. Wang Ru Shuang shook her head. She glanced at Wang Chong with a deep gaze. Xing Yuan Chun didn't insist on it. She got off the carriage, and when she passed by Wang Chang's mother, she harumphed coldly before walking into the bamboo forest. Wang Zhuyan was the last one to come out. Only after Big Aunt disappeared did she sneak out. Without Big Aunt Xing Yuanchun's presence, the atmosphere was much more harmonious. Aunt. Wang Zhuyan walked up to Wang Chang's mother and said apologetically, "My mother's words were a little harsh, but she isn't a bad person. I'll apologize on her behalf, so please don't take it to heart." "Hee hee, silly child, why are you apologizing?" "How could I?" Wang Chang's mother shook her head with a smile. "Indeed, Shu Hua, Yuan Chun's personality is just like that. Just let it go in one ear and out the other." Big Aunt Wang Rushuang walked over with a smile. The aunt and niece chatted for a moment before their gazes turned to look at Wang Chong simultaneously. Getting, Wang Chong's heart skipped a beat. Big Aunt was still fine, but cousin Wang Zhuyan's gaze was filled with malicious intent. It was as though she was looking at a huge piece of meat. TSK, isn't this our family's little Taozhu? Why, have you forgotten about second sister after earning some money? How can that be? An embarrassed expression appeared on Wang Chong's face. In the eyes of Wang Chong's big aunt, uncle, and mother, they couldn't help but chuckle. Even though Wang Chong was currently in the limelight, resolving the crisis of the Wang clan and earning a huge sum of money, he couldn't bring himself to do so in front of his cousin Wang Zhuyan. It was as though he had been restrained. "Where's my share? You've earned so much money, surely you haven't forgotten about me, right?" Wang Zhuyan stretched out her hand and harumphed, gesturing as though she was counting money. "How can that be? I've been keeping the money for second sister's rouge. When second sister needs it, I'll send it over." Wang Chong said. "That's more like it." As Wang Zhuyan spoke, she couldn't help but burst into laughter. Wang Zhuyan laughed, and the others followed suit. Only Wang Chong was bewildered. "Right, don't leave after the birthday banquet. I have something to ask of you," Wang Zhuyan suddenly said. Wang Chong was surprised. It was rare for his cousin to look for him, especially on an important occasion like grandfather's 70th birthday banquet. "I understand." Even though Wang Chong was perplexed, he quickly nodded his head. When she spoke, although she was smiling, her expression was very serious. Usually, when such an expression appeared on her face, it meant that the matter was extremely important. Wang Chong didn't dare to be careless. "Remember, don't forget it." Only then did Wang Zhuyan nod her head in satisfaction. After bidding farewell to Wang Chong's mother and big aunt Wang Rushuang, she dived into the bamboo forest. After cousin Wang Zhuyan left, Wang Chong's big aunt Wang Rushuang followed suit. However, different from her cousin, her gaze was extremely gentle, and it could even be said to be filled with gratitude. "Child, thank you." Big Aunt Wang Rushuang was moved. Without her big brother and sister-in-law around, there was no need for her to hide it. For her husband, Li Lin's matter, she had pleaded with the old master countless times. However, the old master's personality was too stubborn. Once he had decided on something, it was impossible for him to change his mind. Wang Rushuang was on the verge of despair. In fact, she even felt that her husband would die of old age in the North Gate. However, things happened too abruptly. Wang Rushuang didn't expect that the one who resolved this problem for her would be her rebellious and profligate nephew. In just a short period of time, her husband, Li Lin, was transferred out of the North Gate and even promoted by a rank. Even now, Wang Rushuang still found it inconceivable. "Aunt, there's no need to say that. We are a family. Furthermore, Uncle has helped me as well." As Wang Chong spoke, he glanced at Uncle behind him. Wang Chong was speaking the truth, but in the ears of big aunt Wang Rushuang, it turned into humility. She felt even more grateful to him. This child. "Chonger, if you have time in the future, pay Aunt Duo a visit. You should get closer to your cousin, Wang Liang. Wang Liang. Your cousin is here as well, why aren't you getting down? At the end of his words, he turned around and bellowed at the carriage behind him. Wait a moment. Wait for me to finish making this wooden bird. This kind of thing is very popular in the capital right now. It costs 5 taels of silver each, and if it can fly, it'll be 10. I'll make a few more, and I'll surely be able to earn quite a bit of money. The voice in the carriage seemed to be extremely busy and focused. Wang Liang. Wang Rushuang flew into a rage, and her face steeled. Listening by the side, Wang Chong couldn't help but burst into laughter. The only one who could say such words was his cousin, Wang Liang. Cousin Wang Liang wasn't skilled in literature or martial arts, but he was extremely interested in making money through business. He was extremely sensitive to the movements in the market. He was always able to find a business opportunity and earn a sum from it. The only problem was, just like what he said, he could only earn 5 taels of silver each time. It had always been a small business. The sound of wood creaking could still be heard from the carriage, and cousin Wang Liang was still busy inside. This child, Big Aunt Wang Rushuang, felt helpless as well. Forget it, Shuhua. It's about time. I'm afraid that fourth brother will only arrive very late. Let's go in first. Not too far away, a few Imperial Army experts opened up a path for them. The old master had finally sent word that they could enter. The carriage started moving, and the group walked in. The old master's residence was called Erudite Pavilion. It was heavily guarded, and it was hard to tell how many experts were guarding it. The moment Wang Chong and his mother walked in, Big Uncle and Big Aunt were already waiting in the main hall. Along with cousin Wang Zhuyan and cousin Wang Li, they stood in a straight line, and the atmosphere was solemn. As soon as Wang Chong finished speaking, everyone in the room immediately looked over, including the old master and old madam who were sitting on the armchairs. For the first time, they noticed Wang Chong, and a strange look appeared in their eyes. This time, when the people of the Wang clan came to offer their blessings, everyone said, "Blessings as vast as the East Sea, longevity as long as the South Mountain." Wang Chong was the same, but he added a few words at the end, and the entire mood instantly changed. The two of them had heard plenty of birthday blessings, but this was the first time they had heard such a speech. "Hee, old master, listen carefully. This child is very similar to your demeanor back then." Old madam suddenly said with a smile. "Not bad." The old master nodded with a smile, not saying much. But by the side, Wang Chong's big uncle, big aunt, and uncle were visibly moved. Everyone in the Wang clan knew that in order to prevent the Wang clan from getting too arrogant, the old master rarely praised others. Even for Wang Chong's big uncle, the old master would only nod his head slightly most of the time. A simple, "not bad," might sound like nothing much, but those who were familiar with the old master knew that this was already a rare sight. "Also, grandson has a gift for you," Wang Chong said. The moment Wang Chong said those words, the atmosphere in the room suddenly changed. By the side, Wang Chong's big aunt, Wang Rushuang, signaled to Wang Chong with her eyes, and Wang Chong's big uncle also fell silent. On the other hand, even though Wang Chong's big aunt had a displeased expression on her face a moment ago, she was sneering coldly by the side. Everyone in the Wang clan knew that the old master was upright and incorruptible, and he never liked to accept gifts. Not only did he not accept gifts from outsiders, even if they were from the Wang clan, he would never accept any gifts other than on a joyous occasion. On top of that, he only accepted gifts from Wang Chong's uncles and uncles. As for the younger generation, he didn't accept any gifts at all. He didn't want the younger generation to be tainted by the customs of the officialdom from a young age, forcing them to learn how to reciprocate gifts. Who would have thought that just after the old master praised Wang Chong would immediately break the taboo? Children really can't stand compliments. Wang Chang's big aunt said sinisterly by the side. Seated on the chair, the old master stared at Wang Chong expressionlessly. Even the smile on the old lady's face retracted. What gift did you give him? Unexpectedly, the old master suddenly asked. His gaze was fixated on the rectangular object in Wang Chang's hands. No one could tell what he was thinking about. A saber and a sword. Kneeling on the floor, Wang Chong said honestly. Hong. The moment Wang Chong said those words, the entire hall burst into an uproar. Chonger, what are you doing? Wang Chong's mother's face darkened. She had noticed that when Wang Chong boarded the carriage, he was holding a long object tightly wrapped in a long cloth. Just that, Zhao Shuhua didn't expect it to be a saber and a sword. Sabers and swords brought about a calamity of blood. For Wang Chong to take out such a weapon in front of the old master, it was a grave offense. Wang Chong, back down. Wang Chong's big uncle, Wang Zhen, bellowed. Previously, Wang Chong had helped him resolve the matter regarding his eldest son, Wang Li, to prevent the Yao clan from making use of him. As a result, Wang Zhen's view of Wang Chong changed drastically. That was also the reason why he stepped forward to stop Wang Chong's big aunt from ridiculing him in the carriage. But to gift a sword and a saber on such a joyous occasion like his 70th birthday, this was too ridiculous. Even though Wang Chong was still young, it was unacceptable for him to do such a thing. Chonger, how can you be so insensible? Aren't you cursing your grandfather? Hurry up and keep the item and apologize to grandfather. Wang Chong's big aunt said anxiously. This child was too young and rash. Not too long ago, his outstanding performance had caught the attention of the old master. In fact, due to his birthday speech, the old master even made an exception and praised him. How could he make such a mistake so quickly? Wasn't this destroying his own future? Wang Rushuang had a good impression of Wang Chong. Wang Rushuang didn't think that Wang Chong was doing it on purpose when he gifted a sword and a saber on his birthday. Most likely, it was due to the fact that the young were ignorant and didn't understand such taboos. Unlike the old master, the old lady had an amiable personality. But at this moment, she retracted her smile and pursed her lips tightly. Wang Chong's cousin, Wang Li, didn't say anything. Instead, he glanced at Wang Chong and frowned. On the other hand, Wang Zhuyan was shocked by Wang Chong's actions. She followed behind Wang Chong's big aunt and shot him a meaningful glance. Why did you give me a sword and saber? The old master asked gravely. The atmosphere in the room grew even more stifling. Wang Chong held onto the sword and kneeled on the floor, but there wasn't any change in his expression. What grandson gifted is a heavy sword. Grandson thinks that this sword is the most suitable weapon for grandfather, and it can best express the feelings in grandson's heart. Before the others in the room could react, the old master was able to tell what Wang Chong was talking about. And Wang Chong's big uncle couldn't help but glance at him in astonishment. This nephew of his was truly surprising him. A heavy sword without an edge is just a simple work of art. Wang Chong's words were undoubtedly implying that the sword he gifted wasn't sharpened. A truly powerful sword didn't need to be sharpened to possess immense might. As for those truly exquisite weapons, they didn't need to be polished meticulously either. Just like the saying, the chest is as empty as a valley, while the abdomen is filled with knowledge and wisdom. Could it be that Wang Chong was trying to say that even though the old master had already retired and lived in such a simple and unadorned residence, he was still an influential official who wielded great authority in the empire and was respected by the masses? His status had already reached a level where he didn't need to be rewarded with a high official salary, the purple ribbon fish token, or the congratulations of the officials. Just like the heavy sword in Wang Chong's hand. If this nephew of his really had such thoughts, and that was why he gifted the old master a heavy sword as a gift, then this was truly incredible. This was something that even Wang Zhen hadn't thought of before. Without a doubt, regardless of whether it was a birthday peach or anything else, there was nothing more fitting for the old master's heart than this. As expected, the old master seemed to have thought of this as well, and a smile appeared on his face. "Bring it over," the old master said as he stretched out his hand. Wang Chong kneeled over and respectfully placed the sword into the old master's hand. This was something that Wang Chong was willing to do. Wang Chong's respect for the old master came from the bottom of his heart. There were many things that one could only understand after many years. Regarding the old master, Wang Chong only came to understand many things after the old master passed away. In the Tang dynasty, there were two true legends. One was Yao Feng's grandfather, the pillar of the Yao clan, Old Master Yao. And the other was his grandfather. Everyone respectfully addressed him as Duke Jiu. He had lived a life of vicissitudes and weathered many storms. He had once defended the borders of northern Tibet and fought against two Turkic khaganates. He had also once criticized the current situation in the royal court with impassioned speeches, stripping away the old prejudices and ushering in a new atmosphere in the royal court. Back then, there was a coup in the royal court, and when the empire was on the brink of collapse, he stood his ground and supported the current holy emperor, resulting in the unprecedented prosperity of the empire. His students and acquaintances were all over the world. When he was at his peak, he retreated bravely. He had lived an honest and upright life, and he was respected by the empire. In fact, even after he retired, the current emperor couldn't resist building this four-quarters embassy in order to retain him. Every historical figure had a prototype. Wang Chong was once perplexed as to why the old master wielded such great influence in the royal court, but he couldn't find such a person in history. It was only many years later that a name flashed across Wang Chong's mind. Only then did Wang Chong realize who his grandfather was. Zhang Jiuling. He was a famous minister in the history of the Tang dynasty, as well as the last of his generation. But in this world, he was known as Wang Jiuling, and everyone respectfully addressed him as. Chapter 90. Everyone in the hall was dumbfounded. No one could understand what was going on. In the past, the old master would have already flown into a rage. Yet, at this moment, he still had a pleasant expression on his face. Of the entire hall, only Wang Chong's cousin was the first to react. He seemed to have guessed something and a contemplative look appeared on his face. Wang Chong's big uncle, Wang Zhen, happened to see this sight and he sighed deeply. A complicated emotion flashed across his eyes. Oh, there are words on the sword. The old master had just removed the black cloth wrapping the sword when he noticed a few ancient words on the sheath. His interest was piqued. Yes, grandson has given this sword a name. Wang Chong lowered his head and replied. Kingdom Knight. The old master removed the layers of black cloth and took out the heavy sword. There weren't any luxurious gems or gems on the sheath. The sheath of the heavy sword was black and simple. On the scabbard, there were two large characters written in ancient seal script. The old man's eyes lit up when he saw it. Kingdom Knight, this sword shall be known as the Kingdom Knight sword. At the same moment, Wang Chong's voice sounded in everyone's ears. Chonger, how did you do it? Grandfather is a renowned minister of the empire, and he has contributed greatly to the empire. Even His Majesty is respectful of him. How can his illustrious achievements be summed up by the words Kingdom Knight? How did you forge the sword? You're too careless. Before the old master could speak, Wang Chong's big uncle, Wang Zhen, saw the words on the sheath and frowned. His eyes lit up when he saw Wang Chong's previous performance, and he couldn't help but praise the latter for putting in the effort. But at this point, he realized that something was amiss. His father was a renowned minister, and in the entire Tang dynasty, the only one who could match up to him was the Yao clan's old master Yao. Using the term Kingdom Knight to describe his father would be underestimating his father's contributions and standing in the Tang dynasty. In the end, Wang Chong was still a 15-year-old child. Even though he was talented in other aspects, he was still lacking in political affairs. Uncle is wrong. Nephew's sword is not used to boast about grandfather's contributions, but to express grandfather's thoughts. Wang Chong knelt on the ground and said nothing. He looked at his grandfather. When the Lord worries, his subjects will be humiliated. When the Lord is humiliated, his subjects will die. The monarch was worried about the affairs of the state, and the officials took it as a humiliation. The monarch was humiliated, and the officials repaid it with death. Therefore, during the Western Han dynasty, when the Han envoy Lai Dan was killed, Chang Hui, alone, disregarding his own life and death, led the troops of the western region to destroy Kucha. This is a national scholar. During the reign of Emperor Xian of the Western Han dynasty, the Han envoy Gu Ji was killed. Chen Tang wrote a memorial to the emperor, "Those who openly offend the strong Han must be killed no matter how far away." During the reign of Emperor Ming of the Eastern Han dynasty, Ban Chao was ordered to go to the western regions. He met the envoy of the Xiongnu in Shanshan. The Xiongnu army was strong and their defense was tight. Ban Chao said, "Nothing ventured, nothing gained." Leading 72 Han soldiers, he slaughtered the Xiongnu that night and conquered the western regions. This was also a kingdom night. If everyone in the world was a national scholar, why would grandfather be so persistent in retreating? Grandfather wouldn't need to retreat, His Majesty wouldn't need to establish this four-quarters embassy, and our great Tang wouldn't need to worry about the world being unable to prosper. Kneeling on the ground, Wang Chong said with a stern expression. Even though these words were said by Wang Chong to his grandfather, they were also the thoughts in Wang Chong's heart. Wang Chong had always been unable to understand his grandfather's thoughts. It was not until many years later, when he was appointed as the Grand Marshal of the world and sat in that position, that he truly understood his grandfather's thoughts at that time. Seek for one's duty in one's position. When one sat on that position, what he considered was no longer his personal interests but the country and the world. In his previous life, the Central Plains had been through a calamity, and by the time Wang Chong took over, the Central Plains was already on the verge of collapse. Even though Wang Chong racked his brains and gave his all, he couldn't save the Central Plains alone. Even after several decades, he was still unable to change the fate of the Central Plains. This was the deepest regret in Wang Chong's heart. Be it in his previous life or this one, it was the same. There were countless nights in the past when Wang Chong thought of the heavy responsibility he carried on his shoulders, and he would find it hard to sleep. When he was unable to hold on alone, Wang Chong couldn't help but think how great it would be if there was someone in the world who could replace him and become his right-hand man. Just like what Wang Chong had said, if everyone in the world was like a kingdom knight, how could he have been defeated, and how could the Central Plains have fallen into the enemy's hands? If everyone in the world was like a kingdom knight, everything would have been different. Just that, Wang Chong couldn't say all of this out. He could only make use of his grandfather's birthday to speak of it. In this world, he was probably the only one who understood his grandfather, but his grandfather might not necessarily understand him. Everyone in the room was confused at the start, but as Wang Chong spoke, they couldn't help but be visibly moved. Ha ha ha. Good, good, good. Chapter 91. Lord, Fourth Gongzi is here. Just as the group was speaking, a black-armored Imperial Army expert holding a thick halberd walked in from outside and respectfully knelt on the ground. Oh! Hearing those words, everyone's eyes lit up. The old master also sat up slightly. Let him in. Little uncle is finally here. Wang Chong had been listening to the conversation of the crowd by the side, and upon hearing those words, his eyes widened in excitement. The Wang clan's 4 brothers consisted of Big Uncle, Big Aunt, Father, and Little Uncle. Even though Little Uncle wasn't too far away from the capital, his situation was the most unique. Little Uncle was the commander of the Imperial Army training camp, and every year, he would shoulder the responsibility of selecting elites from the various regions and training them at Tianzhu Mountain. On top of that, he was also in charge of the training of the Imperial Army elites. As such, even though he wasn't too far away from the capital, as he was an Imperial Guard of the Holy Emperor, he didn't have much freedom. Ha ha ha, brother, sister-in-law, big sister, brother-in-law. You're all here. Outside the Four Quarters Embassy, a hearty laughter sounded before anyone could be seen. In just a short while, a skinny but exceptionally capable young general with extremely tanned skin strode in from the outside, looking travel-worn. Father, I've returned to offer my blessings. The young general strode in, and at the entrance of the main hall, he bowed respectfully to the old master and old madam. Hee, Mir is back. It's good that you're back. Upon seeing the young general, the old madam was agitated. Looking at his tanned appearance, her heart ached for him. In the Wang clan, Wang Chang's little uncle was the youngest, and to date, he was unmarried. This had always been a thorn in the old madam's heart. Come in. You've worked hard on Tianzhu Mountain. Compared to the old madam, the old master was much calmer. Little uncle nodded and responded. His gaze swept around and soon fell on Wang Chong, who was in the crowd, and he secretly winked at him. Wang Chong couldn't help but chuckle. Among the elders, the one who was closest to Wang Chong was this uncle. He was the youngest, so the age gap between him and Wang Chong was also the smallest. Most importantly, little uncle had a cheerful temperament and never had any special expectations for the younger generation. In his previous life, when Wang Chong was at his most rebellious and mischievous, when a group of elders was disappointed in Wang Chong and criticized him, only his youngest uncle was not arrogant and even joked with Wang Chong. Therefore, among the elders, Wang Chong liked this uncle the most. Their relationship was also the closest. Little uncle walked over and stood next to Uncle Li Lin. Little uncle had been working hard on Tianzhu Mountain. It was rare for him to come back, so the old master couldn't help but ask about it. Little uncle answered them one by one. Now, only Yen, and the others haven't arrived yet. The Wang clan's members were all gathered together. The old master was clearly very happy, and the smile on his face grew wider. However, when these words fell into the ears of Wang Chang's big aunt, Xing Yuan Chun, she abruptly said, isn't there another one in the prison? Wang. The moment Wang Chang's big aunt said those words, the temperature in the hall immediately plummeted. The old master, old granny, Wang Chang's big uncle, big aunt, uncle, and even little uncle fell silent. All of them turned their gazes toward Wang Chang's big aunt. On the other hand, Wang Chang's wife, Zhao Shuhua, felt a lump in her throat, and tears nearly fell from her eyes. Even Wang Chong fell silent. Wang Chong knew that big aunt was talking about his second brother, Wang Bei. Of the 4 siblings of the Wang clan, other than his youngest sister, Wang Chong had 2 older brothers. His eldest brother had inherited his father's legacy while fighting in the outer territories. His second brother was the most unique one, and he was locked in the prison. This had always been his mother's greatest source of pain. But everyone knew that it wasn't his fault that his second brother was locked in the prison for so long. In the Wang clan, everyone knew that Wang Chang's second brother was a taboo. Why are you looking at me? I didn't say anything wrong. Wang Chang's big aunt, Xing Yuan Chun, also knew that she had misspoken, but as the eldest wife, she refused to admit her mistake in front of so many people. Enough. Haven't you caused enough trouble? Big Uncle Wang Zhen said with a dark expression. She knew that the old master didn't like to hear such things, but she still intentionally brought it up. Wasn't she intentionally trying to make the old master unhappy? Yes means yes, no means no. Can't mother even say it out loud? Cousin Wang Li was displeased. He stood up to protect his mother and glared at his father. Wang Chong paid no heed to Big Aunt and the others. His mind was in turmoil. It should have been more than 3 months. Wang Chong thought. It's about time for me to pay him a visit. Of all of Wang Chang's siblings and kin, the one who was the most distant, aloof, and aloof wasn't Wang Chang's cousin Wang Li. It was Wang Chang's second brother, Wang Bei. If Wang Chang's older cousin had a proud and aloof personality that even his mother didn't care about him, then compared to his second brother, Wang Bei, he was like a child in the presence of a great sorcerer, a vast difference between them. Second brother Wang Bei wasn't close to anyone. Ever since he was young, he kept a distance from Wang Chong and the others. They didn't speak much, and they didn't play together. Even with Wang Chang's big brother, they didn't have much to say to each other. But Wang Chong knew that he couldn't be blamed for this. His real second brother wasn't like that. Enough. In the main hall, the old master slammed his palm on the table. He couldn't bear to watch any longer. All of you, get out. The old man's face was as cold as frost, and a terrifying aura burst out from his body. Even Wang Chang's big uncle Wang Zhen shuddered in fear, needless to say, the others. The old man was well versed in both the pen and the sword. He was a top-notch expert at a young age. Back then, during the upheaval in the palace, it was the old man who single-handedly turned the tide and supported the current holy emperor to ascend to the throne. Although it had been so many years and he was already old, coupled with the heavy injuries he had suffered in the war back then, his strength had regressed. However, he was still incomparable to the juniors present. The old man did not get angry easily. Now that he was angry, everyone kept quiet out of fear. Even Wang Chong lowered his head. Even though Wang Chang's aunt had been rebutting him previously, she couldn't help but feel suffocated and didn't dare to say anything when she saw the old man really getting angry. Old master, calm down. It's rare for the children to visit you. Besides, Yuan Chun did not do it on purpose. The old lady hurriedly tried to smooth things over. Jenner, Mir, Ru Shuang, hurry up and leave. Seeing that the old master was truly angry, no one dared to provoke him anymore. They hurriedly walked out of the hall. Yaoer, you stay. Grandfather likes you the most. Coax grandfather so that he won't be angry. The Wang family's little sister also wanted to jump down from the embrace of the two elders, but she was stopped by the old lady. There were only a handful of females in the Wang clan. Furthermore, little sister was the youngest and had an innocent personality. She was the best at coaxing the old master and the old lady, so she was the only one who could stay. Today is the old master's 70th birthday. Must you make everyone unhappy? Walking out of the erudite pavilion, Wang Chang's big uncle Wang Zhen's complexion was awful. The Wang clan had a strict upbringing, and the old master and the old lady had never quarreled in their entire lives. Thus, no matter what his wife, Xing, did, Wang Zhen tolerated it. Furthermore, Xing Yuan Chun was in charge of the finances. The Wang clan, with its guards, maids, and nannies, were all managed by Xing Yuan alone. There wasn't a single person in the Wang clan who was skilled in business. If not for Xing Yuan's unique talents, she would have been able to manage a few businesses in the capital to support the family. Wang Zhen's salary was far from enough. This was also the reason why Wang Zhen tolerated Xing Yuan. But this time, she really went overboard. Didn't I tell you about Lear's matter? If not for Chonger's wits to guard against the Yao clan, he would have been made use of by the Yao clan. This child has helped us before, so why must you target him? Furthermore, Zhao Shi had been targeting him ever since the carriage started. In the hall, she even touched on his sore spot, intentionally making the old master unhappy on his wedding day. What are you trying to do? Wang Zhen wouldn't easily lash out at Xing Yuan, but this time, he really couldn't hold himself back. What am I trying to do? Hearing Wang Zhen's reprimand, Xing Yuan couldn't hold back her indignation and dissatisfaction anymore. Wang Zhen, if you could make arrangements for Lear, would there be a need for me to make a move? In the end, the matter with the Yao clan is all because you, as a father, didn't do a good job. If you had made the necessary arrangements, how could such a thing have happened? Li'er is the eldest son of the Wang clan, the eldest son. But look at how he is acting now. It's one thing for Wang Fu of the Wang clan to have a higher standing than him, but what about second brother Wang Bei? He's in jail, and the old master is protecting him. Can't I speak about it? Besides, Wang Zhen, don't forget. The children of third brother are Li'er's greatest competitors. The old master's position and identity are destined to be inherited by Li'er. Why should he share it with Wang Fu and Wang Bei? It's one thing if others don't fight for him, but as his mother, shouldn't I fight for him as well? Xing Yuan's eyes reddened, and her body trembled in anger. That's right. She was harsh, she was vicious, she didn't know where to draw the line, and she went against the old master. But all of this was for her child. Wang Zhen couldn't understand it, but she could. The Wang clan was a clan of ministers and generals. If Li'er wanted to inherit the old master's influence in the royal court and the resources he had left behind, third brother's clan would become his greatest competitor. This was something that couldn't be changed. Wang Zhen was still furious at the start, but upon hearing Xing Yuan's words, he fell silent. At the same time, on the other side of the Four Quarters Embassy, Wang Chong finally met his little uncle. Brat, not bad. I've heard about those matters while I was at Tianzhu Mountain. Wang Chong's little uncle, Wang Mi, walked over and patted Wang Chong's shoulder. Perhaps due to the age difference of only 20 years, it wasn't too ridiculous. As such, Wang Chong's little uncle didn't put on any airs of an elder. Little uncle, you've gotten tanned again. If this goes on, you'll probably turn into a black man. Wang Chong joked, not showing the slightest restraint toward an elder. Black man? Little uncle was astonished. Chapter 92. Lad, are you mocking your little uncle? Even though little uncle didn't understand the meaning behind those words, he could tell that Wang Chong was referring to his dark skin. Thus, he couldn't help but tap him with his finger. Wang Chong simply smiled, not dodging. It's a pity that your second brother can't attend the old master's birthday banquet. Actually, your second brother wasn't like that in the past. Little uncle suddenly recalled something and sighed. I really didn't expect our clan's berserker syndrome to appear on him in this generation. Wang Chong fell silent. He couldn't speak of it in the main hall, but here, the old master and old madam weren't around. Thus, there wasn't much hesitation in speaking. There was an unspeakable secret in the Wang clan, and that was the berserker syndrome. No one knew how it started. They only knew that the berserker syndrome was inherited through the bloodline. Every generation, there would be a member of the Wang clan who would suffer from the berserker syndrome. Once that person was afflicted with the berserker syndrome, the killing intent in their bloodline would take control of them. Their eyes would turn crimson, and their killing intent would burst forth. They would fall into a frenzy, unable to control themselves. And Wang Chong's second brother, Wang Bei, was afflicted with the berserker syndrome. This illness was inherited. Due to this reason, the old master and old madam were filled with guilt toward Wang Bei. I intend to visit second brother in the prison. Wang Chong suddenly said. Oh. Little uncle blinked for a moment before nodding his head. That's good too. Given your current capability and Zhao Fengchen's protection, you should be able to pay him a visit. Little uncle was currently training the Imperial Army at Tianzhu Mountain. In terms of connections, he wasn't inferior to Wang Chong at all. The deeds that Wang Chong had done in the Imperial Army couldn't be hidden from him at all. The only difference was that as the commander of Tianzhu Mountain, he was busy with military affairs. As such, it was impossible for him to leave Tianzhu Mountain as he pleased. Speaking of which, when will you give me a Wuzi steel sword? I'm at the pillar of heaven's mountains, and now people are begging me. Little uncle suddenly chuckled. It's fine if you want it. 100,000 gold taels for one. Wang Chong grinned and stretched out a hand, gesturing for money. Ha! So expensive. Little uncle was startled. He only knew that this kind of thing was very expensive, but he didn't ask in detail. He didn't expect it to be so expensive. Of course. Of course, it would cost 100,000 taels to sell it to someone else, but if it was her uncle. I've already prepared that one for you. Wang Chong said with a sly smile. Ha ha ha, at least you have a conscience. That's more like it. When little uncle heard that Wang Chong had already prepared a woozy steel sword worth 100,000 taels for him, he immediately laughed happily. By the way, uncle, there's something I need to trouble you with. Wang Chong suddenly said with a serious expression. It was the old master's birthday, and it was rare for little uncle to come back. Wang Chong did not look for him for a joke. What is it? Little uncle smiled. I want to ask, uncle, do you know any retired instructors from the Pillar of Heaven's mountains? Wang Chong asked seriously. When? Upon hearing Wang Chong asking about such a sensitive topic, little uncle finally responded with a serious expression. Chonger, why are you asking about this? Little uncle asked warily. Anything that involved the imperial army or the royal family was no small matter. This was a taboo, I'm warning you, even though we're from a clan of ministers and generals, there are some things that you mustn't mess around with. Uncle, what are you thinking about? Do you think that I'm going to rebel? Wang Chong chuckled. In the capital, there were some daring nobles who had extended their influence into the imperial army, hoping to turn it into their private army. This was the imperial army they were talking about. During the reign of the previous emperor, he had confiscated several clans. This was something that many people knew about. However, what Wang Chong wanted to do was worlds apart from this. I want you to help me find some retired experts from the Pillar of Heaven's mountains to help me train some martial artists. There's no age limit, and it doesn't matter even if they're in their 70s or 80s. As long as they're willing to help with the training. Wang Chong said straightforwardly. Little Uncle Wang Mi was an instructor on the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, and he was in charge of the training of the imperial army. This was a huge advantage. However, it was a pity that no one thought of making use of this in his previous life. To be able to train the imperial army, one could imagine how powerful they were. More importantly, they were able to systematically groom a large number of experts. After his reincarnation, Wang Chong had contemplated for a very long time. If he wanted to deal with the dangers in the future, he had to gather powerful subordinates. It was impossible for him to find others for this, and the army was a taboo. There were too many restrictions on him. After much consideration, he could only groom them himself. In terms of groom, there was no one in the Central Plains who was more outstanding than the Imperial Army instructors on the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Wang Chong didn't dare to touch the active instructors, but it was a different story for the retired Imperial Army instructors. Over the years, there were many retired instructors on the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. They had been enjoying the salary of the royal court for a long time, and yet, they were left lying around. This was the greatest waste of resources. Thus, Wang Chong turned his attention to them. If he could gather these people together, he could make good use of them. In the future, this would be his greatest strength. What else could be more powerful than a massive army of imperial army soldiers? This was the ambition hidden deep in Wang Chong's heart. Just that, Wang Chong didn't have such connections. Those people wouldn't listen to him easily either. If he wanted to accomplish his ambitions and plans, he would have to go through Little Uncle. Only Little Uncle was capable of doing so. The instructors on the Pillar of Heaven's mountains are all registered. They have to go through the registration every year. Furthermore, it is strictly forbidden to recruit them from prestigious clans and private individuals. This is a crime punishable by death. However, if your requirements aren't too high, and there's no age restriction, I can help you find a few. According to the rules of the royal court, as long as one has retired for more than 20 years, there's no need for him to report to the Imperial Army Yamen anymore. However, these people are at least in their 50s. Are you sure that it's fine? If it's possible, I can indeed find a few of them. Little uncle asked with a frown. Ha ha ha, that's even better. Wang Chong clapped his hands and chuckled. In his 50s, he wasn't far from his 60s. At this age, if one didn't break through the bottleneck of martial arts, his fighting strength and stamina would be greatly reduced. However, this was what Wang Chong didn't care about. In his 50s, he was at the age where he had the most experience. He would also have a deeper understanding of martial arts. Wang Chong only cared about the techniques and experience they had mastered. He didn't need them to go to the battlefield to kill the enemy. If he was lucky, he might even be able to find a few powerful instructors. I really don't understand what you're trying to do. However, don't blame me for not reminding you. These people live a comfortable life. The monthly salary given to them by the royal court is nearly 1,000 taels of gold. It's impossible to hire them easily. Little uncle said. Ha, if it's a matter of money, it'll be even easier. Help me ask them. Just tell them that each of them has 100,000 taels of gold every year. Ask them if they want to come. Wang Chong said. What? Wang Chong's little uncle leaped in shock. His eyeballs nearly popped out of their sockets. To hire a person for 8,000 taels of gold for a month, even he would be tempted, needless to say others. However, thinking about the price Wang Chong could sell a sword for, he felt relieved. The current Wang clan was no longer the Wang clan of the past. Wang Chong, you have to think it through. There were white-haired elders, mature middle-aged men, energetic youths, and even children around his age, but no matter who they were, all of them were either rich or noble, and they exuded a deep sense of power and influence. In fact, Wang Chong even saw a few officials of the royal court with purple fish amulets in their hands. Chapter 93. Wang Chong looked at the silhouettes outside the walls and sighed. These people were the greatest resources of the Wang clan, as well as the greatest legacy of his grandfather. Even though the Wang clan was usually poor, even though Wang Chong was a direct descendant of the Wang clan, his monthly allowance couldn't even reach the vast crane pavilion. In fact, he was even toyed with by a hoodlum like Ma Zhou. However, in the Central Plains, in the Tang dynasty, there was no one who dared to look down on the Wang clan. The old man was a person of virtue and prestige, and was highly respected in the court. On the other hand, his students and old acquaintances were spread all over the world, and they were involved in all sorts of professions. Some of them were in charge of finances, some of them were involved in the military, some of them were officials of various prefectures, some of them were teachers, some of them were scholars, some of them were officials of the borders, and some of them were generals of the military. Regardless of which profession they were in, these people wielded extraordinary influence. The status of a clan of generals and ministers wasn't just for show. Even when the Yao clan was at its peak, they didn't dare to look down on the Wang clan. Instead, they viewed the Wang clan as a thorn in their side, a thorn in their flesh. To Wang Chong, after his second reincarnation, what he wanted the most was the acknowledgement of his grandfather's old acquaintances and students. Whoever obtained the approval of these people, whoever was able to unite these people would possess an extremely great power. However, it wasn't easy to obtain this power. Even Wang Chong's grandfather was helpless before it. This wasn't a problem of grandfather's approval. In order to obtain this power, one had to obtain the acknowledgement of everyone. It was easy to obtain the acknowledgement of one or two people, but it wasn't an easy task to obtain the acknowledgement of so many people. Thus, Wang Chong's big brother didn't succeed, Wang Chong's second brother didn't succeed, Wang Chong's cousin Wang Li didn't succeed as well. In fact, Wang Chong's big uncle, father, and little uncle had all failed long ago. The succession of a large clan had never been an easy matter. It wasn't just the Wang clan, the Yao clan, and the other clans as well. It was just that the difficulty and methods of succession differed. In the future, when the old master passed away, he might have acknowledged Big Uncle as his successor. However, it was hard to say how many people truly approved of Great Uncle. For many people, perhaps out of respect for the old master, they would acknowledge him on the surface. However, it was absolutely impossible for him to truly mobilize this power like the old man did. This was also the greatest problem of the Wang clan succession. At the same time, it was also a sore point for the old master. Boom! Just as Wang Chang's mind was in turmoil, the doors of the Four Quarters Embassy suddenly opened, and the crowd outside excitedly filed in. There was no crowding. Everyone naturally lined up neatly and walked in the direction of the erudite pavilion in an orderly manner. Their faces were rosy, and they chatted as they walked. Their natural and joyful expressions made it seem as if the 70th birthday celebration was not for Wang Chang's grandfather, but for their own family members. Seeing this, Wang Chong let out a long sigh in his heart. In the entire Wang clan, grandfather was probably the only one who could earn their heartfelt respect. Coming down from the fake mountain, Wang Chong saw these people entering the erudite pavilion to offer their blessings to the old master. Without the old master's permission, the Wang clan wasn't allowed to interact with the old master's students and old friends. This was a taboo. As such, when these people offered their blessings, be it Wang Chong or little uncle, they all avoided them. The entire ceremony lasted for a very long time. Row after row of people entered without bringing any gifts. This was also the old master's rule. After offering their blessings, row after row of people walked out from the main entrance. The entire process was orderly. After an unknown period of time, the entire ceremony finally came to an end. In an instant, the atmosphere in the courtyard suddenly became tense. Wang Chang's big aunt, and Mother Zhao Shuhua all became nervous. Everyone looked in the direction of the erudite pavilion in anticipation. Only Wang Chang's little uncle chuckled lightly. With his hands behind his head, he leaned against a fake mountain with a content expression. "Brat, do you think grandfather will call you in?" Unknowingly, cousin Wang Zhu Yan suddenly walked around a bamboo forest and appeared behind Wang Chong. "Ha, second sister, if Big Aunt finds out that you are here, aren't you afraid that she will pull your ears?" Wang Chong chuckled, not replying directly. "Brat, are you itching for a beating?" Using the bamboo forest as cover, cousin Wang Chong avoided her mother's gaze and raised her fist threateningly. Big Aunt had always disliked cousin Wang Chong being too close to the Wang clan. This was something that Wang Chong had always known. However, this didn't change cousin Wang Chong's personality. At her age, even if Big Aunt wanted to control her, it would be hard for her to do so. Just that, it was inevitable for her to be taught a lesson by Big Aunt every time. "I really don't understand why you grandsons would view such things with such importance. My big brother is like this, your big brother is the same, and from the looks of it now, even you brat is the same." Wang Zhu Yan stretched out her finger and flicked it lightly, sending a bamboo leaf flying far away. Her eyes were filled with disdain and dissatisfaction. Military affairs and politics had always been unrelated to women. The major affairs in the erudite pavilion had never had anything to do with them, granddaughters and daughters-in-law. Grandfather had never invited her in either. On the other hand, it was the eldest grandsons who were bleeding from the competition. This made her feel both dissatisfied and disdainful. Wang Chong smiled and shook his head, not replying to her words. He was determined to fight for the rights to enter the erudite pavilion, and he was determined to do so with all his might. However, this fight wasn't for personal authority. Wang Chong had his own reasons for fighting for the rights to the pavilion. If he wanted to fulfill his wish and accomplish the mission he shouldered in his life, Wang Chong had to find a way to make use of grandfather's influence and gain their recognition. However, Wang Chong couldn't tell cousin Wang Chong about this. The entire Wang clan was spread out around the erudite pavilion, waiting silently. After an unknown period of time, resounding footsteps sounded. A fully armored Imperial Army commander appeared at the entrance of the erudite pavilion. This Imperial Army commander glanced around and soon, he walked toward the crowd. The gazes of the crowd unconsciously gathered on the commander of the Imperial Army. Even Wang Chong couldn't help but hold his breath. "Young Master Li, Duke Jiu has ordered for you to enter the conference hall." Just 8 to 9 zhang away from Wang Chong, the Imperial Army commander's footsteps came to an abrupt halt. He turned to Wang Chong's cousin Wang Li and said, "Lear, what are you waiting for? Your grandfather has called for you." Big Ant's face lit up in joy as she urged him on. Wang Chong's heart rose high before falling back down. It felt empty. So it wasn't me. For an instant, Wang Chong thought that the Imperial Army commander was here to look for him. Cousin Wang Li soon entered the erudite pavilion. This wasn't his first time entering the erudite pavilion. But every time he entered, Wang Chong could still sense that he was still a little nervous. After the Imperial Army commander entered, he suddenly appeared once more. This time, he headed straight for Wang Chong and stood before Wang Chong. "Chong Gongzi, Duke Jiu invites you over." The Imperial Army commander's attitude was extremely polite. In an instant, the air in the Four Quarters embassy froze. Xingshi stared at the 15-year-old Wang Chong in shock, and her complexion immediately turned awful. There had never been a 15-year-old who was summoned into the erudite pavilion before. Wang Chong was only a child, and the old master had completely shattered her understanding. Damn it! The old master is too biased. Xingshi gritted her teeth as she clenched her fists tightly in her sleeves. Wang Chong paid no heed to Xingshi's awful complexion. At this moment, there was only joy in his heart, and his heart was finally at ease. It's finally my turn. Wang Chong was overjoyed. Even though everyone in the garden was shocked, Wang Chong wasn't surprised at all. In order to reach this stage and gain the respect of the old master, he had done too many things. Be it saving the clan from danger at the vast crane pavilion, scheming against Yao Guang-yi by the borders, the Hyderabad Or's plan, and presenting a sword for the old master's 70th birthday, Wang Chong had done all he could. It wasn't easy for him to reach this stage. Big Ant might think that the old master was biased toward him, but Wang Chong knew that this wasn't any special favor. He had earned it through his own hard work. "Mother, I'll be going in first." Wang Chong walked over and tugged on his mother's hand. Madam Wang stroked Wang Chong's head with a delighted expression. "Second sister, let's go." Wang Chong mischievously gestured to the back of the bamboo forest. Disregarding whether she could see him or not, he walked toward the erudite pavilion. There wasn't anyone in the hall, but voices could be heard from the back of the hall. The old master and his subordinates never discussed matters in the hall, and they didn't allow anyone to view them. Even the Imperial Army guarding the area wasn't allowed to enter. Whether I can win the old master's trust or not depends on this. Wang Chong took in a deep breath, walked around a screen of flowers and birds more than 1 zhang tall, and appeared in the conference hall at the back of the hall. The conference hall was filled with people. As soon as Wang Chong walked in, he saw the old master seated at the very top. Around him, Wang Chong saw many white-haired elders. Every single one of them had a calm demeanor, and they exuded an authoritative aura. Upon seeing Wang Chong enter, these white-haired elders immediately turned to look at him. Even though Wang Chong was mentally prepared, he couldn't help but feel his heart tighten when he saw these white-haired elders in the conference hall. Most of the old master's old friends and students had left for his birthday. Those who were left behind were all old subordinates of the old master who played an important role under his command. They held extraordinary weight. Of all the people who came to the birthday today, they had the highest prestige, and they also had the greatest influence and rallying power. To gain the recognition of the old master's old friends and students, the opinions of these white-haired elders in the conference hall carried a great deal of weight. Only by conquering them and gaining their recognition would he be able to gain the recognition of the old master's old friends and students. This was a test. Chapter 94. Everyone, this is the son of my third son, Wang Yan. He happens to be my third son as well, and his name is Wang Chong. At this moment, the old master spoke. He stretched out his hand and pointed to Wang Chong. Oh! Chong Gongzi. Chong Gongzi, come in. The group of white-haired elders greeted Wang Chong, but they didn't seem to be paying much attention to him. It was only out of respect for the old master that they chose to patronize him. They had seen too many people in this hall. The old master's eldest grandson, Wang Li, his third son, Wang Yan's eldest son, Wang Fu, and his second son, Wang Bei. This was the fourth, so they didn't mind a mere Wang Chong. Junior Wang Chong pays respect to the elders. Wang Chong bowed respectfully, paying no heed to the attitude of the elders. Those who were able to accompany the old master here were his old subordinates. Most of these people had experienced the treacherous palace coup d'état, and they had also followed the old master when the empire was on the verge of collapse and the divine continent had fallen into chaos. They had supported the current Saint Emperor, and when they were young, they had also entered the imperial court and held extremely high positions. Although they were over 60 now, they still possessed extraordinary rallying power and influence. None of them were the clan heads of prestigious clans or influential figures. Even though they were in their 60s, they still wielded extraordinary influence. Given their influence, there was indeed no need for them to treat a 15-year-old child with too much respect. In fact, if not for the old master's influence, they probably wouldn't even bother to patronize Wang Chong. Take a seat. Move a seat for him. The old man said from above. Those in the conference hall were all veterans. Even though Wang Chong was the grandson of the old master, in terms of seniority, he could only sit at the very back. Furthermore, it was only a small chair, and it was almost all the way to the corner. In truth, the old master had arranged for Wang Chong to listen in. It would be beneficial for him in the future as well. After settling Wang Chong, the group of people in the meeting hall started chatting again. Wang Chong sat in a corner and looked around. In the main hall, other than the old master and his old subordinates, big uncle Wang Zhen was also present. He was seated beside the old master. Eldest uncle was the eldest son, and at the same time, he was also an important minister of the imperial court. Whether or not he could gain the recognition of these old ministers, he would always have a seat next to the old man. Other than big uncle, cousin Wang Li was present as well. When he first arrived at the Four Quarters Embassy, his cousin was filled with frustration and impatience. However, at this moment, he was a completely different person. When the old master was chatting with his old subordinates, he was listening attentively, and a strong desire to perform could be seen on his face. This was completely different from the impression he gave Wang Chong before. Cousin has also won the approval of grandfather's old subordinates. A thought flashed through Wang Chong's mind. His grandfather didn't have the final say on whether he could gain the approval of these old subordinates. He only had the right to recommend. Respect and approval were things that couldn't be forced. Only when it came from the bottom of one's heart would it be effective. Even though his cousin had always tried his best to perform, Wang Chong knew that no matter how hard he tried, it would be impossible for him to win over the old master's old subordinates. It wasn't that he wasn't outstanding enough, but that these old subordinates of his were extremely experienced and had been through great storms in their lives. No matter what kind of talent he had, in their eyes, it was just an insignificant skill and seemed insignificant. Conquering them was not an easy task to accomplish in the first place. Otherwise, big uncle, father, uncle, and little uncle, big brother, second brother, and cousin would all fail. A group of people could only win the approval of one or two old subordinates at the very most. Up till now, no one had been able to win the approval of all of them at the same time. Sweeping his gaze across the meeting hall, Wang Cheng's gaze finally fell on the old master. A hint of sorrow flashed across his eyes. The old master won't be able to survive until the great turmoil. This thought flashed across Wang Cheng's mind. No one knew better than him that 4 years later, grandfather would pass away. The internal injuries from his early years, coupled with the heavy injuries he suffered on the battlefield, coupled with the many years of hard work, even after his retirement, when he was over 60 years old, he was still working hard for the emperor, offering advice and suggestions. This caused his grandfather to be constantly in a state of intense mental fatigue. In a few years' time, the old master would pass away. But at this moment, not a single person in the Wang clan, be it big uncle or father, had realized this. Grandfather's strength masked his weakness, such that in the eyes of the Wang clan, grandfather was like a god. He was immortal and would never fall. But in this world, there was no one who could live forever, not even grandfather. That was why the entire Wang clan was in such a state of panic after grandfather's collapse. Even big uncle, who had always been calm and composed, was at a complete loss as to what to do. Wang Cheng would always remember the look of panic on his face that day. Wang Cheng knew that the Wang clan didn't have many chances to inherit grandfather's influence. In 4 years, he had only done it 4 times. As the saying goes, time is short. Without a core figure who could unite the hearts of the people, the old master's students and old acquaintances would all scatter in the future. The influence and standing that the old master had built up throughout his life would disappear in an instant. In the future, even if there were some people who remained loyal to the Wang clan, their influence wouldn't be as great as before. The inheritance of a prestigious clan had never been a simple matter, and this had always been grandfather's sore point. No matter what, I must find a way to win the recognition of grandfather's old subordinates. Sitting by the corner, Wang Cheng clenched his fists tightly. In the room, other than the Wang clan and grandfather's old subordinates, there was also a group of juniors. Every year, during grandfather's birthday, it was the time for grandfather to recommend candidates, but at the same time, it was also the time for the old subordinates to recommend juniors to grandfather to inherit his influence. Rush in the conference hall, a group of people chatted, and unknowingly, their conversation drifted to the current political situation. The eastern and western Turkic Khaganate in the northern grasslands are growing stronger and stronger, and there are signs of them converging. I heard that the khans of the 2 tribes have already sent their khans to discuss this matter. We have to take precautions. A white-haired old man with a sturdy figure and a strong murderous aura exuding from his body said. Wang Cheng recognized him. He was known as Duke of Yi, and he was grandfather's old subordinate. He had participated in the palace coup together with grandfather and supported the Holy Emperor to ascend to the throne. Duke of Yi's surname was Yi, but no one knew his full name, and no one dared to ask about it. Wang Cheng only knew that he was grandfather's most loyal subordinate, and he possessed great strategic foresight. While everyone was still caught up in the internal strife, grandfather's old subordinates had already set their sights on the northern grasslands. In the past few years, the world has been peaceful. According to the decree of the Holy Emperor, we have been doing business with everyone in the world. The eastern and western Turkic Khaganate in the north aren't skilled in smithing, but thanks to our trade, they have bought a lot of refined iron and black iron from our Tang dynasty. Now, their arrowheads are even starting to use inscribed iron. The eastern and western Turkic Khaganate are skilled in riding and archery. If they were to obtain our refined iron and black iron, their fighting prowess would surely soar. This isn't a blessing for the empire. Duke of Ye's hair and beard were all white, but his eyes were bright, and he didn't seem old at all. When he spoke of the eastern and western Turkic Khaganate in the north, his face was filled with worry. That's not all. I've seen the official document from the Bureau of Military Personnel. The scattered cavalry of the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganate are raiding the borders more and more frequently. In the past, we could still trade 2 for 3, and 2 of our men would die. If 3 groups of Turkic cavalry were to come, we would be able to wipe them all out at the cost of 2 casualties. But now, we can only trade 2 for 2. Sometimes, in the case of a surprise attack, we might even suffer more losses. Duke Gyo, this situation is really worrisome. Their fighting prowess is increasing rapidly. A muscular white-haired old man said. Of all of them, he was the tallest. Even though they were seated together, he was at least a head taller than the others. Furthermore, his thick arms and legs made him seem more like a muscular man than an old man. Wang Chong remembered that he was one of grandfather's subordinates, and he was known as Big Beard. When he was young, he had a full beard that he never shaved, and he even took pride in. Even when he was old, he still looked the same, just that his beard had turned white. Also, no one dared to call him Big Beard anymore. Everyone addressed him as Elder Hu. In the past, he was the #1 general under grandfather's command. Duke Gyo, you're the closest to His Majesty. You should speak to His Majesty about this matter. The borders of the empire haven't been peaceful for the past few years. Another white-haired old subordinate echoed, his heart filled with worry. Wang Chong recognized him. This person's surname was Chiao, and he was even older than grandfather. Thus, he addressed him as Old Master Chiao. For the 3 of them to talk about the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates at the same time, it was clear that they had discussed this matter beforehand, and they made use of Duke Gyo's birthday to bring it up. The Anbei Protectorate Manor is the northern border, and it's their responsibility to protect the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates. Did the Anbei Protectorate Manor say anything about this? Hearing the 3 old subordinates mention the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates at the same time, wariness immediately flashed across the old master's eyes. From Qin to Han, from Sui to Tang, the nomadic tribes of the north had always been a huge threat to the Central Plains. During the Qin dynasty, the Central Plains was forced to construct the Great Wall, and 100,000 elite soldiers were stationed there. The Han dynasty faced the White Ascension disaster, and the Sui dynasty suffered from many invasions. By the time the Tang dynasty arrived, the Central Plains had always been wary of the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates. Back then, the old master had once led an army to the north and defeated the allied armies of the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates. However, the Tang dynasty had also suffered heavy losses in that battle. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.